shocking incident at my birthday party. My husband slapped me, but my smile made him regret it instantly. Have you ever felt controlled or manipulated without even knowing it? Psychological manipulation is a hidden force that affects our relationships, work, and lives. In today's video, we will uncover how psychological manipulation works and how to protect yourself from it. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Stories TH for more insightful content. A tale of power, manipulation, and redemption in the lavish world of elite Boston society, where wealth and status govern everything. Elise Harrington appeared to live the life of perfection. Married to James Harrington, heir to one of New England's oldest fortunes, she seemed to have everything one could desire: luxury, respect, and a place among the city's most influential families. But behind the gilded facade, Elise was building something far more powerful than the life her in-laws had meticulously constructed for her. It wasn't love or a deep sense of loyalty that had brought her into the Harrington family's fold. It was strategy, wit, and, most importantly, patience. For Elise, the perfect life was not so perfect. The truth behind her marriage, her identity, and the family she had married into was far darker than anyone could imagine. As she watched the seemingly flawless relationships around her, Elise's sharp mind noted the cracks in her perfect life and in the people closest to her: James, her husband, and his domineering mother, Victoria Harrington. They were not just a family. They were a dynasty built on manipulation, control, and deceit. When Elise first married James, she had assumed that the Harringtons' old money, wealth, and stature would bring her the happiness and peace she sought after years of hard work as a corporate attorney. However, it didn't take long before she realized that the family was not simply wealthy, they were powerful in a way that extended far beyond their business empire. They wielded their influence over everyone in their orbit, using subtle psychological manipulation to maintain control. And Elise, who had spent years studying corporate fraud and defending powerful institutions, recognized this manipulation all too well. As she observed the family's behavior, Elise grew more and more alarmed. She noticed small discrepancies in James' behavior, which he would explain away with an excuse. He would come home from family gatherings distant and withdrawn, as if something had happened to him, something that affected his decisions and emotions. But it wasn't until she discovered the details hidden in family business documents, subtle hints of financial fraud, and questionable bank transfers, that Elise knew she couldn't turn a blind eye. Over the next 3 years, Elise began her quiet investigation. She tracked every strange meeting, every altered behavior from James, and, most troubling of all, Victoria's manipulation. Elise discovered that James' mother, Victoria, had been the architect of his transformation. She had enlisted the help of Dr. Thomas Whitley, James's childhood therapist, to implement a highly sophisticated behavioral modification program. This program involved both physical and psychological conditioning to ensure James would be the obedient heir to the Harrington empire, a puppet in his mother's hands. For years, James had been conditioned to respond to specific verbal and physical triggers. These triggers were designed to force him into submission, to mold him into the perfect figurehead of the Harrington family legacy. At first, Elise had only suspected that something was wrong, but as the years passed, she accumulated irrefutable evidence. She used burner phones, encrypted files, and a backup laptop to secretly store all the information she had gathered. She had created an intricate web of documents, photographs, and audio recordings, all of which painted a grim picture of the manipulation James had been subjected to. Elise knew the truth. She knew that her husband was not just a product of his upbringing, he was a victim of it. The Harringtons had built their wealth through financial manipulation and coercion, and their grip on James was as tight as the control they exerted over their business empire. But it was not just the financial deceit that troubled Elise. It was the psychological conditioning that had stripped James of his autonomy, of his sense of self. The breaking point came on her birthday. Victoria had orchestrated a celebration for Elise, inviting all of Boston's elite to the Hestia Gardens, a restaurant overlooking the shimmering waters of the harbor. It was meant to be a perfect evening filled with laughter, expensive gifts, and the kind of decorum only the Harringtons could command. But Elise had other plans. She had been quietly documenting everything, and tonight was the night everything would come to a head. Elise had worked tirelessly for 3 years to prepare for this moment. As the evening unfolded, she could feel the tension mounting, knowing that her well-crafted revelation was imminent. Victoria, ever the master of ceremonies, began to weave a tale of how Elise had become the perfect partner for James, loyal and supportive, the ideal daughter-in-law. As Elise sat at the center of attention, a platinum bracelet was presented to her, a symbol of her place within the family's grasp. But Elise wasn't listening to Victoria's praises. She wasn't focused on the gift or the smile on James's face as he mechanically placed it around her wrist. Instead, she was preparing for what would come next. The atmosphere in the room shifted when Elise took control of the moment. She activated the recording on her phone, knowing that her meticulously collected evidence would soon be displayed for everyone to see. In a calm and measured voice, Elise spoke up, addressing the gathered crowd of powerful figures who had been complicit in the Harrington family's empire. "I've spent 3 years building a case against the Harringtons," she said, her voice carrying across the terrace. "And tonight, everything will change." The room fell into stunned silence as Elise revealed the dark secrets of the Harrington family. She showed them the evidence, the financial fraud, the offshore accounts, and, most damning of all, the psychological manipulation that had been used to control James. The betrayal she had endured physically and emotionally was now exposed to the very people who had supported the Harringtons for decades. James, sitting in shock, was confronted by the truth he had been kept from for so long. The conditioning he had been subjected to was no longer hidden. It was out in the open for the world to see. The shocking revelation sent ripples through the gathering. As Elise's words sank in, the carefully constructed facade of the Harrington family began to crumble. The once powerful figures who had protected them started to retreat, their alliances shifting as they realized the depth of the family's deception. Elise, standing tall and resolute, knew that her journey was far from over. Her personal vengeance had been fulfilled, but the real work was just beginning. The collapse of the Harrington Empire was not only a victory for Elise, but for all the people who had been manipulated, coerced, and silenced by this powerful family. In the days that followed, Elise's actions set off a chain reaction. The FBI began its investigation, seizing documents and assets from the Harringtons. The evidence Elise had gathered exposed the criminal empire built on years of manipulation and deceit. As the federal authorities moved in, Elise's once perfect life was forever altered, but not in the way she had expected. The truth had set her free, and now she could help others who had been victimized by similar systems of control. Elise's work didn't end with the fall of the Harringtons. She used her newfound freedom to create the Cognitive Liberty Legal Foundation, an organization dedicated to fighting psychological manipulation, coercive control, and financial exploitation. She became an advocate for those who had been silenced and oppressed by powerful institutions, using the lessons she had learned from her own experience to help others break free from the chains of control. As for James, his recovery was slow and painful. The man he had become the man who had slapped her in front of their guests. The man who had been manipulated by his own family wasn't the person she had fallen in love with. But Elise understood that he was a victim too. She chose to help him, not out of pity, but because she recognized that his struggle for identity and autonomy mirrored her own. Their marriage, built on lies and manipulation, was shattered beyond repair. Yet Elise knew that the future held something new, something more meaningful. She had not just exposed the Harringtons' empire. She had reclaimed her identity, her autonomy, and her power. And she would use that power to fight for justice, not just for herself, but for others who had been silenced and oppressed by the powerful. Through her work with the Cognitive Liberty Legal Foundation, Elise became a beacon of hope for those who had suffered at the hands of powerful families and corporations. She had transformed her pain into a force for good, using her legal expertise to help those in need. In the end, Elise's journey was not just one of revenge. It was a journey of self-discovery, of standing up to manipulation and control, and of using the truth to build something better in its place. The fall of the Harrington family was just the beginning. And as Elise stood at the forefront of a movement for psychological freedom and justice, she knew that the real victory was not in their defeat, but in the restoration of those they had harmed. The path ahead was still challenging, but with every case, every client, and every victory, Elise was building a legacy of liberation, not control. The rise of power, the fall of the false empire, a story of revenge and redemption. In the world of high society, especially in a place like Boston, appearances are everything. The Harrington family was no exception. With their wealth, status, and influence, they were seen as a model family perfect in every way. James Harrington, the heir to the family's fortune, was expected to take the helm of their business empire and maintain the facade of a prosperous dynasty. By all outward measures, his wife Elise, an ambitious and talented corporate defense attorney, had everything one could ever wish for: luxury, respect, and a place in the city's elite circles. However, beneath the surface of the perfect marriage and the gilded life that Elise led with James, there were cracks. Elise had never been naive. She wasn't just a woman enamored by wealth and societal status. Behind her carefully constructed life was a woman who, by virtue of her profession and her upbringing, could see manipulation from a mile away. From her first days in the Harrington family, Elise began to notice something was wrong. Her marriage to James had begun as an idealized romance, but slowly transformed into something much darker, a situation she would spend years documenting and building a case against. James was not just a man shaped by his family's expectations, he was a product of their psychological conditioning. For years, Elise had watched with growing concern as her husband became a hollow version of himself. His once vibrant personality was replaced by a robotic compliance to his family's whims, particularly to his mother, Victoria. James was not free to make his own choices. Every decision he made seemed to be preordained by the powerful force of his family's influence, particularly Victoria's iron grip on his life. As Elise dug deeper into the family's affairs, what she uncovered sent chills down her spine. She knew that something was deeply wrong with James, and as a corporate lawyer, she began noticing small discrepancies in the business records. She began to trace hidden accounts and offshore transactions that led her to a troubling discovery. Her husband, as well as his family, were involved in extensive financial manipulation and criminal activities. More disturbingly, she found evidence that James had been the victim of years of psychological control, not just as a child, but into his adulthood. The very man she had married, the man she once loved, was in essence a puppet of his mother's will. For 3 years, Elise meticulously built a case against the Harrington family. Every piece of evidence, she uncovered bank records, family meetings, and even photographs of secretive, unsettling therapy sessions with Dr. Thomas Whitley. The family's therapist who had been paid to condition James was kept in secret. Elise used burner phones and encrypted files, knowing that the Harringtons were watching her every move. As she secretly gathered evidence of their financial crimes, she also began to document the emotional and psychological abuse James had endured. But Elise was no longer the naive woman who had married James, hoping for the best. She had become someone far more powerful, a woman capable of using the tools she had learned as a corporate defense attorney to fight back against the empire that had controlled her and her husband's life. She knew it wasn't just about financial fraud, it was about psychological warfare, emotional manipulation, and power. The Harringtons had taken everything from her, from James, and from countless others, and now it was time for them to face the consequences. The moment of reckoning came on Elise's birthday, a carefully orchestrated moment, both for celebration and for revelation. Victoria had planned a lavish celebration for her daughter-in-law at one of Boston's most prestigious venues, the Hestia Gardens. The entire rooftop was reserved for this private affair, attended by the city's elite, the people who had long supported the Harrington family. Everything was perfect. The mood was festive, the drinks flowing, and the guests enamored by Victoria's social grace and James's stoic presence. But Elise had other plans. Over the years, Elise had become adept at controlling the narrative. She had been playing a long game, carefully waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. As the evening unfolded, with all eyes on her, Elise felt the weight of years of manipulation lift off her shoulders. Her prepared statement was ready. The people in that room had no idea that they were about to witness the end of the Harrington dynasty. Victoria, ever the queen bee, made her usual speeches, praising Elise for being the perfect partner to James and for fulfilling her role as the devoted daughter-in-law. The praise was designed to reinforce Elise's position in the family, but Elise wasn't fooled. She knew that Victoria's affection was just a well-rehearsed performance, designed to control the narrative. Elise had been taught how to play the role of the dutiful wife, how to be charming in front of a crowd, how to respond with the perfect expressions of gratitude and devotion. But tonight, Elise would be the one controlling the story. As the evening progressed, Victoria's manipulation grew more apparent. She handed Elise a Tiffany gift box, another item to solidify her position within the Harrington legacy. It was a platinum bracelet, the type of ostentatious gift that symbolized Elise's place in the family's web. Elise took it without hesitation, knowing exactly how to play the part. As James helped her put the bracelet on, Elise was already mentally preparing for the moment of truth. She wasn't just the obedient wife anymore. She was a woman in control of her own destiny. Then, when the moment was right, Elise made her move. The entire room was captivated by her calm composure as she spoke. With a calm and deliberate tone, she revealed the truth. She spoke about the financial fraud, the offshore accounts, and the extensive evidence she had gathered over the past 3 years. And most devastating of all, she revealed the psychological manipulation that had been carried out on James, her husband, and how Victoria had orchestrated every move in his life to ensure he would be controlled. Elise turned the tables on Victoria, making the matriarch's perfect family look like the true criminals they were. In front of a crowd of Boston's elite, Elise confronted Victoria. "You've spent years conditioning James to respond to your will," she said, her voice steady despite the electric tension in the room. "And now, everyone knows the truth." What followed was chaos. The powerful figures who had once supported the Harringtons, the ones who had protected their empire for decades, now began to retreat. Elise had exposed the Harringtons for what they were: frauds, manipulators, and criminals. The FBI was already on their way to seize assets, to begin their investigation into the Harrington family's financial empire. Elise's long game had worked. She had brought the family to its knees. As the evening unfolded and the truth spread, Elise's calmness never faltered. She knew that her work was far from over. The fall of the Harrington Empire was just the beginning. The real work lay in ensuring that justice was served, that the people who had been hurt by the family's manipulative ways would be compensated, and that the family's legacy would be torn down piece by piece. In the weeks that followed, the FBI began investigating the Harringtons more thoroughly. Elise's evidence, along with additional information she had provided, revealed the extent of their crimes. Not just financial fraud, but psychological manipulation that had been used to control James and others for years. James, once the perfect heir to the family fortune, was now a man grappling with the truth of his own existence. He had been a victim as much as Elise had been, manipulated by his mother for decades. His recovery would be long and difficult, but Elise had helped him see the truth, and that was the first step in his healing. For Elise, her work didn't end with the collapse of the Harrington Empire. With the wealth she had helped expose, she founded the Cognitive Liberty Legal Foundation. Her mission was clear: to fight against psychological manipulation, coercive control, and financial exploitation. Her foundation became a sanctuary for those who had been victims of similar abuse, helping them reclaim their lives and their identities from the powerful forces that had controlled them. As the Harringtons faced the consequences of their actions, Elise realized that her journey had never been just about exposing the truth. It had always been about restoring freedom for herself, for James, and for countless others who had been manipulated by powerful families and institutions. The path ahead was not easy, but Elise had the tools, the courage, and the strength to continue her fight. In the end, Elise's victory wasn't just in the fall of the Harrington family. It was in the rise of something greater, the rise of truth, justice, and personal liberation. As she stood at the forefront of her foundation, helping others reclaim their lives from the shadows of manipulation, she knew that her journey was just beginning. The Harrington Empire had crumbled, but in its place, Elise had built something far more powerful, something that could never be controlled. And as she watched the sun set over Boston's skyline, she knew that her legacy would be one of freedom, of breaking the chains that bound people to oppressive systems, and of empowering those who had once been silenced. She had become not just a woman seeking revenge, but a champion for liberation. The fall of the Harrington dynasty, a story of liberation and justice. In the glittering world of Boston's elite, few names commanded as much respect as the Harrington family. With decades of history, vast wealth, and unmatched influence, they were the epitome of success in the eyes of the public. James Harrington, heir to this impressive empire, was the centerpiece of their carefully curated image. His wife, Elise, was everything society expected from a woman of her status: poised, intelligent, and flawlessly positioned at the top of the social ladder. But beneath this picture-perfect facade, there was darkness and undercurrent of manipulation, deceit, and control that threatened to undo everything. Elise, once a bright young lawyer, had become entangled in a life where her every move was dictated not by her own desires, but by the invisible strings pulled by her mother-in-law, Victoria Harrington. For years, she had been trapped in this gilded cage, playing the role of the perfect wife, the dutiful daughter-in-law, and the ideal corporate defense attorney. At first, Elise had been charmed by the life James promised, a life of luxury, social status, and power. She had fallen in love with him, or so she thought. However, as time passed, Elise began to see the subtle signs that her marriage was not what it appeared to be. James had become a hollow shell of the man she had married. The vibrant, passionate partner she once knew had been replaced by a man who was distant, robotic, and emotionally detached. It wasn't just James who had changed. Elise began to notice that the Harrington family, particularly Victoria, exerted a kind of psychological control over him. James's every action seemed calculated, responding to commands issued by his mother or other members of the family. Elise had always been keenly aware of power dynamics, both in the corporate world and in her personal life, and she realized that her husband was not the master of his own fate. He was a puppet, and the strings were being pulled by his family. As Elise began to question everything she knew, she started to see the cracks in the Harrington empire. She noticed discrepancies in the family's business dealings, numbers that didn't add up, investments made under suspicious circumstances, and transactions that seemed to vanish into offshore accounts. The more she looked, the more she saw, and soon Elise uncovered a vast web of financial fraud, market manipulation, and corruption. The Harringtons were not just a powerful family. They were a criminal enterprise disguised as philanthropists. Elise's suspicions about her marriage grew stronger as she started to realize that James's strange behavior wasn't just a personality change. It was part of a deeper, more insidious problem. Victoria, in her bid to maintain control of the family's fortune, had been using psychological manipulation to keep her son in check. Elise began to suspect that James's childhood therapist, Dr. Thomas Whitley, was more than just a family confidant. He was, in fact, a tool used to manipulate James's behavior, a man paid to condition James to respond to specific psychological triggers. Over the course of 3 years, Elise secretly documented everything she could find. She gathered files, tracked bank transfers, recorded conversations, and uncovered evidence of manipulation that went beyond financial crimes. She began to understand the true extent of the Harrington family's control over James. The more she discovered, the more she realized that her husband was not just another victim of corporate greed, he was a victim of his own family's manipulation. But Elise was no fool. She knew that she couldn't simply confront the Harringtons and expect them to back down. She was a lawyer by profession, and she understood how the legal system worked. She also knew that the powerful figures she was up against would stop at nothing to protect their empire, even if it meant destroying her. But Elise was determined. She wasn't going to be just another casualty of their machinations. She was going to take them down piece by piece. For Elise, this was no longer just about exposing the Harringtons' crimes. It was about reclaiming her life. It was about breaking free from the psychological prison they had built around her. And it was about helping James see the truth of what had happened to him. She knew that she couldn't do this alone, and so she began working with trusted contacts in the federal government, including the SEC and the FBI, to build an airtight case. Every piece of evidence she gathered, every recording she made, every document she secured, was all part of a carefully orchestrated plan. Elise had learned the art of patience. She knew that the best way to strike was not in haste, but in perfect timing. She spent years watching and waiting for the right moment to expose the truth. And when that moment came, it was on her birthday, a celebration that would turn into a reckoning. Victoria had meticulously planned the event, as she always did, thinking it would be a moment to solidify her control over James's life and the family's future. But Elise was about to turn the tables. The night of the celebration at the Hestia Gardens, a luxurious venue overlooking the Boston Harbor, was an event of the highest order. Victoria, dressed in her signature midnight blue Chanel, was the queen of the evening, presiding over a gathering of Boston's elite politicians, business leaders, and media moguls. James, as always, was by her side, looking every bit the part of the perfect son, the dutiful heir to the Harrington fortune. Elise had been rehearsing her part for months. She knew how to play the role of the perfect wife, the gracious hostess. She had learned to wear the mask of compliance, even as she hid the truth beneath it. But tonight, that mask would fall. Elise wasn't just going to sit back and watch her life unravel. She had carefully prepared for this moment, and the plan was already set in motion. Throughout the evening, Elise played her part smiling, greeting guests, and accepting lavish gifts. Each moment was a calculated move, each smile hiding the storm that was brewing. Victoria presented Elise with a gift, a platinum bracelet from Tiffany, a symbol of the family's control over her. Elise accepted it with a smile, knowing that the bracelet was nothing more than a physical representation of the chains that bound her. But Elise had more than just a plan to expose the family's crimes. She had the evidence, the recordings, the documents, and the bank transfers that would bring down the entire Harrington empire. As the evening progressed, Elise's calm demeanor never wavered. The time for action was near. When a moment finally arrived, Elise stood before the room, calm and composed. She began to speak, her voice steady and clear, recounting the financial fraud, the market manipulation, and the psychological conditioning that had been carried out by Victoria and her allies. The guests, once enraptured by the grandeur of the event, were now frozen in place, stunned by the revelation. Elise's voice rang out, each word carrying the weight of years of injustice and manipulation. And then Elise turned the tables. She spoke about the specific details of James's manipulation, the behavioral conditioning sessions with Dr. Whitley, and the monthly payments made to him from the family's accounts. She revealed the truth about the Harringtons, their criminal empire hidden behind a facade of philanthropy. Elise's voice carried the weight of her years of work, and the room was silenced as she laid bare the truth. Victoria, ever the strategist, attempted to regain control of the narrative. She tried to spin the situation, to make Elise appear as the villain. But it was too late. Elise had already won. The guests, once loyal to the Harringtons, now began to question everything they had known about the family. Elise's plan had worked. The FBI was already en route, and the evidence she had collected was being sent to the authorities. Victoria's carefully constructed empire was crumbling before her eyes. As the evening unfolded, the reality of the situation set in. Elise's carefully prepared evidence was now in the hands of the authorities. The Harringtons' financial crimes, their manipulation of James, and their systemic abuse of power were now public knowledge. The guests at the party, who had once been complicit in the Harringtons' world, were now witnesses to its unraveling. Elise knew that her work was far from over. The fall of the Harrington family was just the beginning. But as she stood there, blood on her lips and triumph in her heart, she knew that she had accomplished what no one thought possible. She had exposed the truth, and she had reclaimed her life. In the weeks and months that followed, the Harrington empire continued to crumble. Federal investigations into their financial crimes and psychological manipulation took center stage, and the family's connections to corrupt politicians, business leaders, and media moguls were laid bare. Elise's work, however, was just beginning. She had turned her focus to helping the victims of psychological manipulation, financial abuse, and coercion, establishing the Cognitive Liberty Legal Foundation. The foundation became a beacon of hope for those who have been exploited by powerful families and corporations. As Elise watched the once imposing Harrington legacy fade into history, she knew that her victory wasn't just about revenge, it was about creating something better, something that would empower those who had been oppressed for so long. She had reclaimed her own power, and now she was helping others do the same. The fall of the Harrington Empire wasn't just a personal victory for Elise. It was a triumph for justice, for truth, and for freedom. It was the end of an era of manipulation and control, and the beginning of a new chapter, one where the victims of the Harringtons would finally find their voices, and their lives would be restored. Elise had learned the hardest lessons of all: how to recognize manipulation, how to fight back, and how to rise from the ashes of a broken life to create something better. And in doing so, she had become a force to be reckoned with, a woman who had taken down a dynasty and built something far more powerful in its place. The fall of the Harrington Empire, a story of liberation, control, and justice. In the heart of Boston, a city that thrived on wealth, tradition, and power, the Harrington name was synonymous with legacy. Their family had built an empire over generations, establishing themselves as pillars of the elite. From politicians to CEOs, from the high courts of law to the grand social events, the Harringtons were everywhere. And at the heart of this well-oiled machine was James Harrington, heir to one of New England's oldest fortunes. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and married to Elise, a Harvard-educated lawyer who was also part of the city's finest circles. To outsiders, their life seemed flawless, the epitome of what every couple aspired to be. Elise was the picture of poise and grace, a woman who had it all: prestigious career, social standing, and an adoring husband. But behind this perfect facade, there was a storm brewing. Elise's life was a far cry from what it appeared to be on the surface. She wasn't the successful lawyer that society thought her to be. She was a woman trapped by an invisible force of family that controlled her every move, her thoughts, her desires. Her story didn't begin in Boston, nor did it start with the Harringtons. Elise was once a bright, ambitious young woman who dreamed of making her mark in the world. She attended the best schools, studied law, and found herself quickly rising in the ranks of a prestigious law firm. Her future seemed limitless. But everything changed when she met James. James, heir to a fortune that spanned generations, was charming, suave, and incredibly persuasive. He showered Elise with attention and admiration, making her feel like the most important person in the world. He was everything she had ever wanted in a partner, at least that's what she thought at the time. Their whirlwind romance was a perfect match in the eyes of Boston society. The union between Elise and James Harrington was seen as a merger of two powerful families, and it was no surprise when they became the golden couple. But beneath this outward success, Elise started to sense something more sinister at play. The more she got to know James and his family, the more she realized that he was not as free as he appeared. James had become a puppet, a marionette in the hands of his mother, Victoria Harrington, whose manipulative tactics ran deep. Elise had begun to notice that James's behavior had changed over time, as if he was losing his autonomy. At first, it was subtle slight shifts in mood, a reluctance to make decisions on his own, a lack of passion for the things he used to care about. But as Elise observed more closely, the pattern became undeniable. James was being controlled, and Victoria was the puppeteer pulling the strings. Victoria Harrington, the matriarch of the family, was the embodiment of control. She had built the Harrington empire from the ground up and would stop at nothing to maintain her hold over it. Elise quickly realized that Victoria's methods weren't just limited to corporate power plays. She had extended her reach into James's personal life. Elise started to suspect that James's strange behavior was not just a result of stress or family obligations. It was the result of psychological manipulation. It was during a quiet night in their Beacon Hill home when Elise stumbled across something that would change everything. She was searching for documents for a work project when she found a hidden file on James's laptop. The contents were damning. It wasn't just family business information. It was a list of behavioral triggers, commands, and responses. As Elise scrolled through the pages, she was horrified to realize that her husband had been psychologically conditioned. Victoria, with the help of Dr. Thomas Whitley, a family therapist, had been manipulating James's behavior for years. The documents detailed how James was conditioned to respond to certain words, gestures, and emotions. It was clear now. James wasn't just emotionally distant, he was being controlled. The more Elise dug, the more she uncovered. She found evidence of offshore accounts, secret bank transfers, and documents that indicated how Victoria had been using the family's wealth to cover up financial fraud. Elise had always known there was something off about the way Victoria handled family affairs. But seeing the scope of it all, she realized how deep the corruption ran. She had unknowingly married into a family with a history of psychological control and financial manipulation, a family that cared more about its empire than the people within it. As Elise pieced together the puzzle, her sense of betrayal grew. The man she had married, the one she had fallen in love with, had been molded by his family into something he wasn't. His love for her was real, but it had been tainted by the psychological programming he had undergone for years. He was no longer the man who had once promised to share his life with her. He was a hollow shell, a victim of his own family's schemes. Elise knew she couldn't stay silent any longer. She couldn't continue playing the role of the dutiful wife while the Harringtons continued their destructive ways. But she also knew that exposing them would come with great risk. Victoria, with her influence over Boston's elite, would stop at nothing to protect her family's name. Elise had to be careful. She spent months compiling evidence, recording conversations, and documenting every shred of proof she could find. She had become a detective in her own life, working tirelessly to gather the pieces that would bring down the Harrington empire. The final piece of the puzzle came when Elise discovered a secret about the Harrington family trust. The trust stipulations were clear. James had to maintain a stable marriage for 5 years to access the funds. Elise realized that this was the key to everything. Victoria's control over James, her manipulation of his behavior, and the family's financial crimes were all tied to this trust. If Elise could expose this, it would all come crashing down. The time for action finally arrived. It was Elise's birthday, a day that Victoria had planned for months, a day that was supposed to be a celebration of her life within the Harrington family. Victoria had spared no expense in orchestrating the event, securing a prime location at the Hestia Gardens, one of Boston's most exclusive venues. The rooftop terrace was reserved, and the guest list was filled with the city's most powerful figures. To the outside world, it was just another lavish party, another night in the life of the Harringtons. But for Elise, it was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment she would expose the truth. As the evening unfolded, Elise played her role perfectly. She smiled, accepted gifts, and pretended to be the perfect wife. But inside, she was counting down the moments until her carefully planned revelation would unfold. Victoria, as always, was the center of attention, her every move calculated, her every word designed to maintain control over her son and the people around her. But Elise was no longer the passive woman she had been in the past. She had taken control of her own life, and tonight, she would take control of the situation. The moment of truth came when Victoria raised her glass in a toast to Elise, praising her as the perfect daughter-in-law. Elise smiled and accepted the compliment, but she knew that this was the moment to strike. As Victoria's words filled the room, Elise activated the recording function on her phone. With a calm, steady voice, She began to reveal the truth, the financial fraud, the psychological manipulation, and the conditioning program that had been used to control James for years. The room fell silent as Elise recounted the evidence she had gathered, exposing the Harringtons' darkest secrets. Victoria tried to regain control, but it was too late. Elise had already won. The evidence was irrefutable, and the room was filled with stunned silence as the truth came crashing down. Elise turned to James, her husband, who was standing by her side, his face pale with shock. His conditioning had been broken, and for the first time in years, he was seeing the truth. The psychological triggers that had been implanted in his mind were no longer working, and he was finally waking up to the reality of what had been done to him. As Elise spoke, the FBI agents she had been working with moved in. The evidence was already being sent to the authorities, and Victoria's carefully constructed empire was unraveling before her eyes. The power that the Harringtons had once held over Boston's elite was slipping away, and the truth was coming to light. The guests, who had once been loyal to the Harrington family, were now witnesses to its collapse. The FBI agents began to move through the room, securing evidence, and arresting those involved in the family's criminal activities. Victoria's facade began to crumble. She tried to maintain control, but the cracks were too wide to hide. Her empire was falling apart, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. James, finally free from his psychological conditioning, looked at his mother with horror in his eyes. He realized what she had done to him, and for the first time in years, he understood that he had been nothing more than a pawn in her game. As the evening drew to a close, Elise stood victorious. The Harrington family, once untouchable, was now being torn apart by the very people they had controlled for so long. Elise had not only exposed the family's crimes, but had also liberated herself and James from their manipulative grip. The road ahead would be long, but Elise was no longer the woman she had once been. She was free, and she would spend the rest of her life ensuring that the Harringtons' reign of control would never happen again. The collapse of the Harrington Empire was just the beginning for Elise. In the years that followed, she dedicated herself to helping other victims of psychological manipulation, financial exploitation, and coercive control. She established the Cognitive Liberty Legal Foundation, a nonprofit organization aimed at protecting individuals from the kind of psychological conditioning that had once held her and James captive. As Elise moved forward in her life, she found peace in the knowledge that she had exposed the truth and taken control of her destiny. The Harrington Empire may have fallen, but in its place, Elise built something more powerful, a legacy of liberation, justice, and empowerment. The fall of the Harrington dynasty, a journey of betrayal, redemption, and justice. In the heart of Boston, a city steeped in history and old money, the name Harrington was synonymous with power, wealth, and status. The Harrington family had cultivated an empire over generations, intertwining their fortune with Boston's elite. They were untouchable in the eyes of society, their influence stretching across politics, business, and law. At the center of this powerful family was James Harrington, the heir to their massive fortune, and his wife Elise. Together, they appeared to embody the perfect couple, successful, well-mannered, and adored by all. But appearances, as they say, can be deceiving. Beneath the glittering surface, Elise's life was far from the fairy tale it appeared to be. She was a woman trapped in a web of manipulation and control, all spun by the very family she had married into. Elise had once been a free-spirited, ambitious young woman. She had earned her place in one of Boston's most prestigious law firms, had a bright future, and a loving, independent relationship with James. However, everything changed when she entered the Harrington family fold. James, who had initially seemed like the perfect partner, was not as he appeared. Elise soon discovered that James wasn't the man she had fallen in love with. He was a puppet, and Victoria Harrington, his mother, was the puppeteer. The reality of the Harrington family's dynamics unfolded slowly at first small moments where James appeared detached, increasingly distant, and disinterested in the world around him. But it wasn't until Elise uncovered the hidden depths of manipulation that she truly understood the kind of hold his family had over him. Victoria Harrington, the matriarch, had always been a formidable force in Boston. She was calculated, ruthless, and brilliant in maintaining control over both her family and her empire. What Elise soon realized was that Victoria didn't just control the family's financial dealings, she had a far more sinister form of control over her son. Through psychological manipulation, Victoria had conditioned James to respond to specific triggers, creating a version of James that was subservient to her every command. Elise began to notice the changes in James, his lack of autonomy, his blank stares, his inability to make decisions without his mother's approval. As a lawyer, Elise knew the signs of psychological control, and soon it became clear James was not the man he used to be. He had been manipulated into submission by his own mother, who treated him like a puppet to control the family fortune. Elise watched as James, once confident and full of ambition, became a shell of himself, living in constant fear of his mother's influence. The situation grew increasingly unbearable. Elise, who had once been a rising star in the legal world, found herself entangled in a marriage that was nothing more than a facade. On the surface, she was the perfect wife, the loving partner, the successful lawyer. But underneath, she was a woman desperate to escape a marriage that had been built on false pretenses, lies, and manipulation. But Elise knew she couldn't just walk away. The stakes were too high. James's conditioning had a far-reaching effect, not just on him, but on their marriage. Elise found herself increasingly isolated, struggling to understand why James had changed. She could no longer recognize the man she had married, and the more she tried to confront him, the more withdrawn he became. Victoria, ever the master of manipulation, made sure to isolate Elise, pushing her further and further from the truth. It wasn't until Elise began to investigate the family's financial dealings that she started to piece together the full extent of the Harringtons' empire of control. During her research, she discovered disturbing financial discrepancies, offshore accounts, fraudulent transactions, and suspicious dealings, all hidden beneath the surface of the family's polished exterior. It was clear that the Harringtons, led by Victoria, were not just wealthy, they were criminal. But it wasn't just the financial fraud that concerned Elise. She soon uncovered evidence of something far darker: James's psychological conditioning. She found medical records, therapy sessions, and detailed accounts of how James had been manipulated from a young age. Dr. Thomas Whitley, a family therapist, was involved in this psychological conditioning, using a series of psychological triggers to control James's behavior. Elise learned that Victoria had paid Whitley a vast sum of money to ensure James's compliance, to make him the perfect heir to the family fortune, one that would never question or rebel. The more Elise uncovered, the more she realized that she had been living in a nightmare. She had married a man who was nothing more than a puppet, a victim of his mother's twisted control. And as Elise discovered more about the Harrington family's criminal empire, she knew she couldn't remain silent. She had to expose the truth, no matter the cost. The first step was to gather evidence. Elise spent months collecting documents, recording conversations, and building a case that would take down the Harrington family. She had become a detective in her own life, secretly documenting everything she found. Elise knew that bringing down such a powerful family would take time, patience, and precision, but she was willing to wait. The final revelation came when Elise discovered that the Harrington Family Trust had specific requirements for James to inherit the fortune. The trust stipulated that James needed to remain married for at least 5 years without any separation or divorce. Elise realized that this was the key to everything. Victoria's control over James and her manipulation of the family's fortune all hinged on this 5-year requirement. It was time to act. On her birthday, the moment of truth arrived. Victoria had planned a lavish celebration for Elise, expecting her to play the perfect wife once again. The venue was the Hestia Gardens, a luxurious rooftop restaurant overlooking Boston Harbor. To the outside world, it was just another extravagant celebration in the life of the Harrington family. But for Elise, it was the moment she had been waiting for, the moment when everything would change. The evening began with all the fanfare that Victoria had orchestrated. Elise played her part, smiling and greeting guests, accepting gifts, and maintaining the perfect facade. But beneath her calm exterior, Elise was counting down the moments until the truth would be revealed. She had prepared meticulously for this day, knowing that her actions would change the course of her life and James's forever. As Victoria raised her glass in a toast to Elise, praising her as the perfect daughter-in-law, Elise knew it was time to strike. With a calm, steady voice, she began to expose the truth. She revealed the evidence of the Harrington family's financial fraud, the psychological manipulation that had been used to control James, and the twisted conditioning program that had turned him into a puppet. Elise spoke with authority, her voice unwavering as she recounted everything she had uncovered. The room fell silent as the truth began to sink in. Victoria tried to regain control, but it was too late. Elise had already won. The evidence was irrefutable. Elise turned to James, who was standing beside her. For the first time in years, James was seeing the truth. The psychological triggers that had once controlled his behavior were no longer effective, and he was waking up to the reality of what had been done to him. As Elise continued, the FBI agents she had been working with moved in. The evidence was already being sent to the authorities, and Victoria's carefully constructed empire was beginning to unravel. The guests, who had once been loyal to the Harrington family, now found themselves caught in the crossfire of a scandal that would shake the very foundations of Boston's elite. Victoria, the woman who had built this empire, now found herself powerless. Her empire was crumbling before her eyes, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. James, who had been manipulated for so long, was finally free from his mother's control. He looked at his mother with horror in his eyes, realizing what she had done to him. The man who had once been his mother's perfect puppet was now awake, and he would never be the same. The collapse of the Harrington family was swift and unrelenting. Elise had exposed the truth, and there was no turning back. The family's financial empire was dismantled piece by piece, their criminal activities laid bare for the world to see. The once proud Harrington name was now tarnished, its legacy forever changed. But for Elise, this was only the beginning. The aftermath of the Harrington downfall would reshape her life in ways she could never have imagined. The work was far from over. Elise had not only taken down a powerful family, but had also exposed the insidious nature of psychological control and manipulation. She knew that the road ahead would be difficult, but she was ready for it. Elise was determined to ensure that the damage caused by the Harrington family would never happen again. In the years that followed, Elise became a leading advocate for victims of psychological manipulation, financial exploitation, and coercive control. She established the Cognitive Liberty Legal Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to helping people who had been manipulated or coerced into submission by powerful families or institutions. Elise's foundation became a beacon of hope for those trapped in similar situations, offering legal support, education, and advocacy for those in need. As the years passed, Elise's life transformed. She had found her purpose, and with it, she found peace. The journey she had undertaken, from being the victim of a controlling family to becoming a powerful advocate for justice, had given her a sense of fulfillment she had never known. And while the Harrington's empire may have fallen, Elise knew that her true legacy had only just begun. In the story of Elise and the Harrington family, we see a narrative that teaches us vital lessons about the importance of self-awareness, resilience, and the pursuit of justice. At its core, the story reveals the dangers of unchecked power and control, especially within families and institutions that may appear perfect on the surface. Elise, once trapped in an oppressive situation, reminds us of the strength that lies within every individual, regardless of age or circumstance. Throughout her journey, she not only seeks justice for herself, but also uncovers a system of manipulation and coercion that affects everyone involved. The lesson here is clear. No matter how powerful or well-established a system may appear, it is vital to question and confront harmful dynamics. For those of us in our later years, it is easy to fall into patterns where we feel we have little control over our own lives, whether in our relationships, families, or even our communities. However, Elise's story teaches us that the truth, no matter how uncomfortable, has the power to liberate us. The story also emphasizes the importance of taking responsibility for one's actions and decisions. Elise did not allow herself to become a passive participant in her circumstances. Instead, she took proactive steps to gather evidence, challenge the status quo, and fight for what was right. This is a powerful reminder for older adults who may sometimes feel disconnected from the fast-paced world around them. Age should not be seen as a barrier to change or self-discovery, but as a time to reflect, understand, and act. It's never too late to make changes in our lives, whether that means standing up for ourselves, confronting injustices, or pursuing our true passions. Elise's growth from a victim of control to a powerful advocate for herself and others highlights that the pursuit of personal agency is not limited by age or past experiences. We all possess the capacity to change the narrative of our lives, to define who we are, and to challenge the forces that seek to limit us. Another key lesson from Elise's journey is the importance of compassion, both for ourselves and others. While Elise had every right to seek revenge on those who had wronged her, her path was ultimately one of healing not just for herself, but also for James, who had been equally manipulated by his own family. In the end, Elise recognized that true strength came from understanding her husband's pain and offering him the opportunity for recovery, even after the deep betrayal. This act of compassion teaches us that healing does not come from simply winning or defeating our adversaries. It comes from recognizing our shared humanity and offering support in times of vulnerability. For older adults, this message is particularly meaningful as we often find ourselves in relationships where one party may be the caretaker or may be struggling with their own burdens. Compassion and empathy towards others, especially in the face of difficulty, is a gift that can transform relationships and communities. Finally, Elise's story serves as a reminder that the pursuit of justice is not always quick or easy. It requires patience, dedication, and a willingness to face uncomfortable truths. Elise spent years gathering evidence and documenting her case before she was able to confront the Harrington family. Similarly, in our own lives, we may find ourselves facing long-standing issues, whether they are personal, societal, or even legal, that require years of effort to address. The lesson here is one of persistence. Life is rarely linear, and progress often comes in fits and starts. Yet, as Elise showed, persistence, combined with a deep commitment to truth and justice, can bring about profound change. For seniors, this is a particularly important lesson. Just because the years may be advancing doesn't mean that it's too late to start anew, seek what is just, or challenge what feels unfair. The real power of Elise's journey lies not just in her ability to dismantle the Harrington Empire, but in her ability to reclaim her own sense of self. She didn't allow the forces that sought to control her to define her worth or dictate her life's path. In the face of deep emotional and psychological manipulation, Elise reclaimed her agency, and in doing so, found her voice. This process of self-reclamation is vital for all of us, particularly as we grow older. It's easy to feel overlooked, forgotten, or powerless as time passes, but Elise's story encourages us to rediscover our passions, our sense of purpose, and to stand firm in our own truth. In essence, Elise's journey teaches us that it's never too late to change, to act, and to reclaim our dignity. Whether we're confronting personal betrayal, grappling with systemic injustices, or simply reflecting on the choices we've made in life, we all have the capacity to challenge the forces that limit us. The story implores us to take control of our own narratives, to seek justice with patience and persistence, and to do so with compassion not only for others, but also for ourselves. The capacity for transformation, healing, and growth exists at every stage of life, and the lessons of Elise's experience serve as a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, no matter the obstacles we face. Have you ever felt controlled or manipulated without even knowing it? Psychological manipulation is a hidden force that affects our relationships, work, and lives. In today's video, we will uncover how psychological manipulation works and how to protect yourself from it. If you find this video helpful, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Stories TH for more insightful content. Waitress brings her daughter to work, and the girl runs to hug the millionaire, calling him dad. Welcome to Stories TH. In today's video, we'll dive deep into the concepts of empowerment and protection that can completely change the way you see life. It's all about taking charge of your own destiny, embracing your inner strength, and ensuring your protection in every aspect of life. If you find value in this video, please like and subscribe to Stories TH for more content that will help you achieve personal empowerment and protection every day. Join our family, and let's grow together. A story of courage, hope, and unexpected help. Sarah's day began as it always did before dawn. The steady hum of the nearby highway filtered through the thin walls of the one-bedroom apartment she shared with her 5-year-old daughter, Lily. The air was cold, the sky still dark with the promise of an overcast day ahead. Sarah wiped sleep from her eyes, pulling herself from the makeshift bed in the living room. There wasn't much room in their cramped apartment, but they made do, just like they always had. Lily, her bright, hopeful little girl, lay curled up on the sofa, her stuffed bunny pressed against her chest. Sarah smiled gently, brushing a lock of her daughter's hair from her face. There was something so sweet, so innocent, about the way Lily slept. If only her life could be as peaceful as her daughter's slumber. Sarah had always dreamed of a different life, a better life for Lily. One where they wouldn't have to worry about bills and secondhand clothes. She had dreamed of giving her daughter a real bedroom, birthday parties with balloons, and toys that didn't show the wear and tear of too many years. But reality had a way of shaping their lives differently. Since Lily's father walked out on them years ago, leaving Sarah to raise their child alone, she had fought every single day. The daily battle consisted of budgeting groceries, keeping up with rent, and working double shifts at the Amber Diner, the only place in town that would hire her. No college degree, no references, just the determination to do whatever it took to keep her daughter safe and cared for. Today was no different. Sarah slipped into her worn-out uniform, a faded blouse, and black slacks, and prepared for the long shift ahead. She gathered Lily's things, the little backpack with crayons, a coloring book, and her most cherished toy, the frayed stuffed bunny. It wasn't much, but it was all they had. As she looked at Lily, a pang of guilt hit her. She hated that her daughter had to see so little of what she truly deserved. But life had given them no other choice. This morning, like many before it, Sarah faced the dilemma of what to do with Lily. The usual babysitter had canceled at the last minute, leaving Sarah with only one option: bring her daughter to work. She hoped the manager, Mr. Parker, would understand. He was a tough one, but maybe he'd have a heart today. It wasn't like Lily would be a bother. She could sit quietly and color in the corner. The air was chilly as Sarah and Lily made their way to the diner. The sky above was threatening rain, but for now, it remained cloudy and gray. Lily, ever curious, gripped Sarah's hand tightly as they walked. "Mommy, why do I have to stay with you at work again?" Lily asked softly, her eyes wide with innocent curiosity. Sarah smiled, though it was forced. "I can't leave you alone, sweetie," she said, trying her best to make the situation seem lighthearted. "It'll be fun. You can draw and see all the people who come in for breakfast." Deep down, Sarah knew it wasn't fun. It wasn't a normal childhood for Lily, but there was nothing else she could do. This was the reality of their lives, and she wasn't going to let her daughter feel bad about it. Sarah tried to smile, hiding the heavy weight on her heart. As they arrived at the diner, the familiar smells of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee filled the air. The warmth from inside contrasted with the cool morning breeze, but it did little to calm Sarah's nerves. The Amber Diner was small, just a local spot for passing truckers and workers who needed a quick meal. But it was all Sarah had. It was her lifeline, the place that allowed her to keep a roof over her daughter's head. Mr. Parker, the manager, spotted Sarah leading Lily by the hand and gave her a stern look. She could feel the tension rise in her chest. "You know the rules, Sarah," he muttered, glancing around to make sure no one else was watching. Sarah could see the disappointment in his eyes. She'd begged him countless times to be lenient about bringing Lily in. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Parker," Sarah said, swallowing her embarrassment. The sitter canceled again. "Lily won't be any trouble. She'll just color in the corner." Mr. Parker rubbed his temples, clearly frustrated, but after a long sigh, he relented. "Fine," he muttered, "but keep her out of the way. We don't want customers complaining." Relief flooded Sarah's chest as she led Lily to a booth in the back. She handed her crayons and a coloring book, telling her to stay put and draw while Sarah worked. Lily nodded, her excitement apparent as she swung her legs in the booth, eager to see her mother in action. Sarah tied on her apron and went straight to work, balancing trays, refilling coffee cups, and rushing to meet the demands of the busy diner. But through it all, she kept an eye on Lily, making sure she was safe. The morning rush came in waves, but Sarah managed. She focused on the work, blocking out the exhaustion, focusing only on her daughter. But just as the lunch rush began, a tall man walked in, a man who would change everything. His presence immediately caught Sarah's attention. He was impeccably dressed, with broad shoulders and neatly groomed hair. He walked with a quiet confidence, a confidence that didn't belong in a diner like the Amber. The hostess seated him at table 5, right in Sarah's section. Sarah's heart skipped a beat as she took in his appearance. She had seen that kind of power before: rich businessmen who wandered in and out of her life with their expensive suits and sophisticated airs. But there was something different about him, something that made Sarah uneasy. She approached his table with a forced smile. "Welcome to the Amber Diner," she said, trying to sound upbeat. "Can I get you something to drink?" The man, who introduced himself as Michael, barely looked up from his phone, an ultra-sleek device Sarah had never seen before. He seemed distracted but gave her a curt nod. "Just water," he said. His voice was calm, even as Sarah tried to steady her nerves. Minutes later, as Sarah prepared his water, Lily appeared at her side. "Mommy, I'm hungry," she whispered, tugging at Sarah's apron. Sarah felt a pang of guilt. She had been so focused on her work that she hadn't even checked if Lily needed anything. But as she turned to grab some snacks for her daughter, disaster struck. Lily had wandered off. Sarah's stomach tightened as she searched for her daughter in the crowded diner. She knew Lily wasn't supposed to approach the customers, especially not during rush hour. But Lily's curiosity got the best of her. She had noticed Michael at table 5, and something about him seemed familiar, almost comforting. Lily ran up to him, threw her arms around his waist, and called out, "Daddy." The entire room fell silent. Sarah froze, the glass of water slipping from her hand and crashing onto the floor. She rushed forward, but it was too late. The damage had already been done. Michael, the man she had only just met, was staring at her daughter, his expression filled with a mix of confusion, surprise, and something deeper longing, perhaps. Sarah pried Lily away, embarrassment flooding her cheeks. She didn't know what had possessed her daughter to call this man daddy. But there was something in Michael's expression that made Sarah wonder if there was more to this situation than met the eye. For a moment, it seemed as though the two of them shared a secret Sarah didn't understand. "Mommy, he looks like the man in my dreams," Lily said softly, pointing at Michael's expensive watch. The words hit Sarah like a wave. Was there some kind of connection? Had Lily seen him before? Or was this just another strange coincidence? Michael, equally bewildered, gently placed his hand on Lily's back, though his expression remained unreadable. The entire diner was watching, waiting for him to respond, and when he finally did, his voice was low but filled with uncertainty. "Her name is Lily," he asked, his voice barely audible. Sarah nodded, her heart racing as she tried to make sense of the situation. Could this man, this stranger, somehow be connected to Lily's father? Over the next few days, the mystery deepened. Michael was not just any customer. He was a wealthy CEO, and his life was far more complicated than Sarah could have ever imagined. After the diner incident, Michael reached out, offering to help Sarah and Lily. He sent groceries, left generous tips, and even suggested meeting outside the diner to discuss what had happened. But Sarah's world, already complicated by the sudden appearance of this man, was about to get even more difficult. The threats began. Sarah received cryptic text messages warning her to stay away from Michael. A mysterious package arrived at the diner, containing a new stuffed bunny, a stark reminder that someone was watching them. She tried to ignore it, but the tension was too much. Her life was no longer just about making ends meet. It had become a fight for safety. Michael, however, wasn't going to let her face this alone. With the help of his security team, they began investigating the threats. They discovered that someone from Michael's business world, someone who had a vested interest in keeping him distracted, had been behind the intimidation. A fixer, hired by a rival company, was the one pulling the strings. Sarah's life had become a whirlwind of surveillance, danger, and uncertain alliances. But through it all, one thing was clear. Michael was determined to protect her and Lily. And for the first time in years, Sarah allowed herself to trust someone who was willing to help her in ways she had never thought possible. As the danger intensified, so did the bond between Michael, Sarah, and Lily. What had begun as an unexpected encounter in a diner had transformed into something far deeper. And though the threat was far from over, Sarah finally allowed herself to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, there was hope for a future where she and her daughter were safe, and where love and support might not be as elusive as she once thought. A journey to justice, empowerment, betrayal, and the path to redemption. The story of Sarah, a woman who endured years of humiliation and mistreatment, is one that resonates with those who have faced adversity, been underestimated, and ultimately found the strength to take control of their destiny. The themes of betrayal, empowerment, and ultimate justice shine through her journey, one that could inspire many who have found themselves at a crossroads in life. Sarah's life began as a quiet, somewhat invisible one. She was a wife, the kind who is often overlooked and disrespected by her husband and his colleagues. She was the kind of person who found herself caught in the shadow of other people's ambitions, while her own dreams seemed far out of reach. The story begins in the humdrum of her everyday life, waking up early in the cramped confines of her one-bedroom apartment, her 5-year-old daughter Lily curled up beside her on the worn sofa. The sounds of the city outside filtered through the thin walls, a reminder that life, no matter how difficult, kept moving. Sarah had always dreamed of something more for herself and Lily. As a mother, she longed to give her daughter the life she deserved, one full of joy, opportunity, and security. Yet that dream seemed far-fetched. The harsh reality of life, with a deadbeat husband who abandoned them, both left Sarah to fend for herself. She had no college degree, no references, and no one to turn to for help. She was a woman trapped in a cycle of low-paying jobs, secondhand clothes, and a constant battle to make ends meet. But despite all of this, Sarah never gave up. She was fiercely determined to provide for Lily and make sure she had something better than what Sarah herself had experienced. Every morning, as Sarah got ready for another long shift at the only diner in town that had given her a job, she couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness. She wished for a better life. She wished for a place to call their own, a real home, not just the cramped apartment that felt more like a temporary shelter than a safe haven. But Sarah kept going, driven by the single most important thing in her life, Lily. As a mother, there was nothing Sarah wouldn't do for her daughter. And so, when a usual babysitter canceled one morning, Sarah was faced with a dilemma. She had no choice but to bring Lily to work. The manager, Mr. Parker, wasn't the most understanding man, but Sarah was desperate. She hoped that maybe, just maybe, he would let Lily sit quietly in a corner and color while she worked. The manager, seeing the desperation in Sarah's eyes, reluctantly agreed, but only with a warning to keep Lily out of the way. The Amber Diner, a small, locally owned restaurant on the edge of town, had become Sarah's workplace, her refuge. It wasn't much, but it was the only place that gave her a chance when nobody else would. The diner smelled of bacon and freshly brewed coffee, and the sounds of clattering dishes and chattering patrons were the soundtrack to Sarah's long days. The job was hard, physically demanding, and low-paying, but it kept a roof over their heads. As Sarah tied on her apron and began to work, she kept a watchful eye on Lily, who was content coloring in a booth near the back. Little did Sarah know, this ordinary day at work would be the one that changed everything. That morning, a man walked into the diner, and everything shifted. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with broad shoulders and a quiet confidence that set him apart from the usual crowd of truck drivers and early morning workers. His name, as Sarah would later learn, was Michael. He sat at table 5, right in Sarah's section. His presence commanded attention, and Sarah couldn't help but feel a little out of place in her worn-out uniform. But she pushed the thought aside. She had a job to do. She greeted him politely, offering to take his order, but Michael barely looked up from his phone. His eyes, a striking shade of gray, seemed to take everything in, yet they revealed nothing. "Just water," he said briefly, before returning his attention to his phone. Sarah hurried off to get his drink, trying not to focus on the odd feeling she had when she was near him. Minutes later, as she returned with his water, she was interrupted by a tug on her apron. It was Lily, who was suddenly hungry. Sarah felt a pang of guilt. She had been so busy that she hadn't even thought to check if Lily needed a snack. But as she turned around to grab a quick snack for her daughter, disaster struck. Lily had wandered off. Sarah's heart raced as she searched the room for her daughter, but it was too late. Lily had walked straight up to Michael's booth and, in an innocent moment of excitement, threw her arms around him, calling him Daddy. Time seemed to freeze. The entire diner fell silent. Sarah's stomach twisted in knots. She rushed over to Lily, tried to explain that she couldn't just hug strangers. But Michael's reaction was nothing like Sarah expected. Instead of getting angry or pushing Lily away, he looked down at her with something akin to longing, something Sarah couldn't quite understand. "Her name is Lily," he asked quietly, his voice trembling slightly as he gazed at Sarah. Sarah nodded, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. She couldn't explain why Lily had called him Daddy, but there was something about Michael's reaction that made her question everything she thought she knew about the situation. Why had Lily called him that? And why did Michael seem so moved by it? What followed was a strange, inexplicable series of events that would change the course of Sarah's life forever. Michael, it turned out, wasn't just a random customer at the diner. He was the CEO of a large company, and his life was far more complicated than Sarah could ever have imagined. After the diner incident, Michael began reaching out to Sarah, offering help in ways she couldn't fathom. He sent groceries, offered financial support, and even wanted to meet with her privately to discuss the strange connection between him and Lily. But with Michael's sudden involvement in their lives came something far more sinister: threats. Sarah began receiving anonymous messages warning her to stay away from Michael. A package arrived at her workplace, containing a stuffed bunny and a chilling note telling her to keep Lily smiling and to stay away from Davenport. Sarah tried to ignore the threats at first, thinking they were just some twisted prank. But as the situation escalated, she realized they were far more serious. The threats weren't just a random act of cruelty, they were a calculated move by someone with a hidden agenda. It wasn't long before Michael and his security team uncovered the truth. Someone from Michael's business world was behind the threats. A rival company, Cash & Holdings, had targeted Sarah and Lily in an attempt to leverage Michael's personal life against him. The anonymous threats, the package, and the strange figure at the playground had all been orchestrated by someone with a vested interest in keeping Michael distracted. Michael, however, wasn't about to let Sarah and Lily face this danger alone. He worked tirelessly with his security team to uncover the identity of the person behind the threats. It wasn't long before they discovered that the person responsible for the break-ins and intimidation tactics was connected to Cash & Holdings, a company embroiled in a high-stakes bidding war with Michael's firm. Sarah, for the first time in years, found herself not just fighting for her own survival, but for the safety of her daughter. She had spent so many years doing everything on her own, never trusting anyone enough to ask for help. But Michael's unwavering support, combined with the efforts of his security team, gave her the strength to confront the people who had been tormenting them. The final confrontation was a turning point in Sarah's life. With the help of Michael's resources and connections, they were able to gather the evidence needed to bring the person behind the threats to justice. The authorities took action, and the shadow that had loomed over Sarah and Lily's lives began to fade. In the end, Sarah emerged stronger than ever before. She had gone from being the underestimated, disrespected wife to a powerful, decisive woman who had fought for her daughter's safety and reclaimed her sense of power. The journey was long, difficult, and fraught with challenges, but Sarah's resilience and determination saw her through. For American audiences, particularly older generations who have witnessed their own struggles, the story of Sarah resonates deeply. Her journey from victim to victor reflects the timeless values of perseverance, integrity, and the importance of standing up for what's right. Through betrayal, adversity, and ultimate justice, Sarah's story serves as a reminder that no matter the circumstances, strength, wisdom, and integrity can lead to meaningful change. Her story offers a powerful message. No one should ever underestimate the strength of a mother, nor the lengths to which she will go to protect her child. It is a tale of empowerment, resilience, and the transformative power of justice. A woman's journey to empowerment, betrayal, and justice. In the heart of every story about empowerment and justice lies the quiet resilience of the human spirit. The story we are about to delve into follows the journey of Sarah, a woman trapped in the invisible chains of societal expectations and personal betrayal. For years, she lived in the shadows of those who mocked her, belittled her, and underestimated her potential. Yet, in the end, Sarah's strength, resourcefulness, and tenacity enabled her to rise above the oppression she had endured and emerge as a powerful force of justice and retribution. Sarah's journey is not just a personal transformation, but a reflection of a larger societal narrative, a battle for respect, equality, and justice, especially in a world where women, particularly mothers, often find their voices drowned out by patriarchal forces. Sarah's story is one of betrayal, but more than that, it is about how a woman can reclaim her power and take control of her life, even when the odds are stacked against her. The roots of betrayal. Sarah's life had always been one of quiet struggle. She wasn't a woman of great wealth or influence, nor did she possess the type of privilege that would afford her opportunities others might take for granted. Instead, she was a mother, a woman who had dedicated herself to her daughter Lily, trying to create a life that would offer her something better than what Sarah had experienced. However, life had not been kind to Sarah. Abandoned by her husband and left to fend for herself and her child, Sarah found herself in a battle that was both personal and financial. She worked tirelessly at the Amber Diner, a small, run-down establishment on the edge of town. It wasn't much, but it was the only job she could find. As a single mother with no higher education and no real career prospects, she had no choice but to take whatever job was available. Every day was a struggle, long shifts, low wages, and little recognition. The world outside her small apartment seemed like a distant dream, a dream that promised more, but one she could never seem to reach. Yet, it was here, in the mundane routine of her life, that Sarah's true battle began. Her husband, a man she had once thought she loved, had abandoned her without a second thought, leaving her to care for their daughter alone. The betrayal she experienced at his hands was not just emotional, it was a betrayal of the very fabric of trust that should exist in a marriage. As Sarah continued to work at the diner, her mind often wandered to the life she had hoped for, a life where she and Lily could thrive, a life where she wasn't just scraping by, but building something meaningful. But those dreams felt further out of reach with every passing day. One morning, the situation grew worse when the babysitter Sarah had relied on for months called in sick. With no other option, Sarah had no choice but to bring Lily with her to work. She was nervous about how her boss would react. The Amber Diner was a small business, and the rules were clear: no children allowed. But Sarah, desperate to make ends meet and care for her daughter, decided to take the risk. She hoped the manager, Mr. Parker, would understand. Sarah guided Lily to the back of the diner, giving her some crayons and a coloring book to keep her occupied. But that morning was unlike any other. It was a moment that would change Sarah's life forever. The unexpected encounter, it was around noon when a man walked into the diner, an unexpected presence in the otherwise humble establishment. He was tall, confident and impeccably dressed. He commanded attention without trying. His name was Michael Davenport, the CEO of a large corporation, though Sarah didn't know that at the time. Michael's presence seemed out of place in the diner, but there was something about him that caught Sarah's attention. She couldn't quite place it. Maybe it was his quiet authority or the way he carried himself, but something felt different. He was seated at table 5, right in Sarah's section. As she approached, she noticed how people in the diner seemed to subtly glance his way, intrigued by the air of power that surrounded him. But Sarah pushed those thoughts aside. She had a job to do. She took his order, and as she walked away, something deep in her gut told her that something significant was about to happen. Sarah didn't realize it at first, but Michael's presence in the diner would mark the beginning of a new chapter in her life, one full of unexpected twists and turns that would lead her down a path of betrayal, empowerment, and ultimately, justice. But then, the unimaginable happened. While Sarah was busy preparing Michael's drink, her daughter Lily, who had been quietly coloring in the corner, suddenly ran up to Michael's booth and threw her arms around him. "Daddy," she exclaimed, her voice loud enough for the entire diner to hear. The entire room fell silent. Time seemed to stand still. Michael froze for a moment, his eyes widening with confusion. Sarah's heart raced as she rushed over to pull Lily away. But Michael's reaction was far from what she had anticipated. Instead of reacting with anger or confusion, Michael seemed strangely moved by the gesture. He looked down at Lily, his expression softening, before asking Sarah if her daughter's name was really Lily. Confusion swirled in Sarah's mind. Why had Lily called him Daddy? Was it a mistake? Or was it something more? But before she could process the situation, the atmosphere in the diner shifted. There was a strange connection between Michael and Lily, one that Sarah couldn't explain but couldn't ignore. In the days that followed, Michael became a fixture in Sarah's life. He reached out to her, offering help in ways that went beyond mere charity. He sent groceries, offered financial support, and even arranged for a private meeting to discuss Lily and their strange encounter at the diner. As Sarah struggled to make sense of it all, she couldn't deny that Michael's presence in her life seemed to offer the possibility of something better, a future where Lily could have the opportunities Sarah had always dreamed of for her. However, with Michael's involvement came a new set of challenges, ones that would force Sarah to confront her past and her present in ways she hadn't expected. Someone, it seemed, was watching. Someone was making sure that Sarah and Lily didn't have a future together. Threatening messages began to appear, warning Sarah to stay away from Michael. Packages began arriving at her workplace, each one more unsettling than the last. A stuffed bunny, a note telling her to stay away from Davenport. These threats were not just idle words. They were a direct attack on Sarah's sense of safety and security. The rising danger as the threats escalated, Sarah realized the true extent of the danger she and Lily were in. Michael, though a wealthy and powerful man, was not immune to the enemies that came with his status. His corporate battles had left him vulnerable to the darker side of business, the kind of ruthless tactics that didn't just threaten deals but lives. The threats against Sarah were not random. They were part of a much larger scheme to manipulate and control Michael through his personal connections. For Sarah, the realization was terrifying. She had already been betrayed once by the man she had loved, and now she found herself caught in a web of corporate deceit and personal danger. She had no choice but to trust Michael and his security team. With their help, they began to investigate the threats, uncovering a startling truth. The rival company, Cash and Holdings, was behind the threats. It wasn't just business, it was personal. The threats were meant to manipulate Michael into making concessions in the corporate world by targeting Sarah and Lily. For the first time, Sarah understood that her life and Lily's were being used as pawns in a much larger game. Michael, however, was not a man to back down. He vowed to protect Sarah and Lily, even if it meant confronting the dangerous forces that had targeted them. With the help of his security team, they began to gather evidence, tracking the movements of Cashin's operatives, analyzing the threats, and uncovering the ties between the rival company and the criminals behind the attacks. For Sarah, the path to justice was not easy. It required her to confront her past fears, her feelings of helplessness, and a lingering doubts about whether she could truly trust Michael and his team. But as the investigation progressed, Sarah found herself rising to the occasion. She was no longer just a victim of circumstance. She was a mother fighting for her daughter's safety. And in doing so, she began to rediscover her own strength. The road to justice, the final showdown, came when the person behind the threats was finally unmasked, a high-ranking executive at Cashin Holdings. With the evidence gathered by Michael and his security team, they were able to bring the individual to justice, ensuring that the threat against Sarah and Lily would finally be over. The victory, however, was bittersweet. Sarah had fought for everything she believed in: her daughter's safety, her own dignity, and the chance to rebuild her life. But the process had come at a cost. It had tested her in ways she hadn't expected, forcing her to question everything she thought she knew about trust, betrayal, and the lengths to which people would go for power. In the end, Sarah emerged victorious, not just over her enemies, but over her own fears. She had faced betrayal, fought for justice, and emerged as a stronger, more empowered woman. The journey had been long and difficult, but it had led her to a place where she could finally see the light at the end of the tunnel. A new beginning. Sarah's story is one of redemption. It is a story of a woman who, despite being betrayed by those she loved, found the strength to take control of her life and fight for the future she deserved. Through her journey, she discovered that true power lies not in wealth or influence, but in the strength of character, the courage to face adversity, and the unwavering commitment to those we love. For American audiences, especially older generations who have experienced their own struggles, Sarah's journey resonates deeply. It is a reminder that no matter how hard life may seem, the human spirit is capable of remarkable resilience. Through betrayal, pain, and ultimate justice, Sarah's story offers hope to those who may feel powerless, showing that it is never too late to reclaim your power and change your destiny. Her journey also highlights the importance of integrity, trust, and the strength of family. In a world where women are often overlooked or underestimated, Sarah's story reminds us that no one should ever be underestimated, and that true strength comes from within. Through betrayal, adversity, and ultimate triumph, Sarah's story is a testament to the transformative power of justice and the unwavering determination to protect those we love. A story of resilience, justice, and reclamation. There's an inherent power in integrity. The ability to stay true to your values, even when faced with overwhelming odds, is a rare and valuable strength. But what happens when integrity, resilience, and the pursuit of justice intersect with betrayal and corruption? What unfolds when a woman, disrespected and underestimated, rises to challenge the system that has oppressed her? This is the story of Sarah, a woman whose journey of betrayal and eventual empowerment proves that the path to justice is often long, painful, and fraught with obstacles, but it is also a journey worth taking. Sarah's story is one of quiet strength, resilience, and personal transformation, where betrayal is not the final word. This is the story of how Sarah's unwavering integrity and unyielding resolve allowed her to reclaim her life and rise above the abuse and systemic inequities she had suffered. It is a narrative that touches on the complexity of personal and professional life, exposing the deep-seated corruption in corporate America and celebrating the ability to overcome it. A life in the shadows. Sarah's life had never been one of luxury or privilege. Born into a modest family, she grew up learning the value of hard work and perseverance. However, those same values often left her vulnerable to the darker sides of human nature. After marrying a man she thought she could trust, Sarah quickly realized that what seemed like a stable and loving relationship was anything but. Her husband, James, was charming, yes, but his flaws, hidden beneath the surface, soon became apparent. James had a way of manipulating those around him, especially Sarah. He played on her insecurities, her fears, and her deep desire to build a life for herself and their daughter. Yet over time, his true nature emerged. He belittled her, mocked her aspirations, and made her feel insignificant in her own home. His ability to manipulate Sarah's emotions left her feeling small and disrespected, all the while convincing her that it was her fault that their life together was crumbling. But the greatest betrayal of all came when James abandoned Sarah, leaving her to raise their young daughter, Lily, on her own. He left without any explanation, without any remorse. He simply walked out, leaving Sarah with nothing but empty promises and shattered dreams. The emotional toll of this abandonment weighed heavily on Sarah. She was left to navigate a world that seemed indifferent to her struggles and invisible to her pain. In the years that followed, Sarah did everything she could to survive. She found work as a waitress at a small diner called Amber Diner. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a job, and it provided her with the means to care for Lily. Still, the deep sense of betrayal lingered. Sarah often found herself questioning her worth, wondering if she would ever be able to break free from the shackles of her past. She was a woman defined by others' perceptions of her, a disrespected, underestimated wife who had been abandoned and left behind. Despite the pain and hardship, Sarah kept moving forward. She kept her head down and worked tirelessly, determined to give Lily the kind of life she deserved. But every day was a struggle, and the weight of her past continued to hang over her like a dark cloud, reminding her of the life she had lost and the dreams that seemed out of reach. A new beginning one morning, Sarah arrived at the diner to find that the babysitter she had relied on was unavailable. With no other options, Sarah was left with the difficult decision of either leaving Lily alone at home or bringing her to work. She knew it would be difficult, but she decided to take the risk and bring Lily with her, hoping the manager, Mr. Parker, would be understanding. The small Amber Diner, where Sarah had worked for years, was about to experience an unexpected turn of events. As Sarah led Lily to the back of the diner, she had no idea that her life was about to change forever. That day, a man named Michael Davenport entered the diner, a man whose presence would disrupt everything Sarah thought she knew about herself and her life. Michael was a tall, well-dressed CEO with an air of quiet confidence, and his arrival marked the beginning of an unraveling of the very life Sarah had known. Though Sarah didn't know it at the time, Michael was about to play a pivotal role in her journey toward reclaiming her power. As Sarah took his order, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something different about him, something that made him stand out from the ordinary customers she served each day. But before she could dwell too much on the thought, a moment of pure innocence disrupted the calm of the diner. Lily, who had been sitting quietly in the back, suddenly ran up to Michael's booth and threw her arms around him. "Daddy," she exclaimed, causing the entire room to go silent. It was a moment that would haunt Sarah for days to come, a moment when everything she thought she knew about her life and her daughter was thrown into question. At first, Sarah was horrified. She rushed over to pull Lily away from Michael, fearing the worst. But to her surprise, Michael's reaction was not one of anger or confusion. Instead, he seemed moved by the gesture, his expression softening as he looked down at Lily. "Is her name really Lily?" he asked, his voice tinged with disbelief. For Sarah, this was the beginning of an unraveling. How could Lily have called this stranger Daddy? Was it a mistake, or was there something more to it? As Michael and Sarah exchanged uneasy glances, the air in the diner seemed thick with tension. And for the first time in years, Sarah wondered if there was more to life than simply surviving. She felt a flicker of hope that perhaps someone, even a stranger, could offer her a way out of the dark, stagnant life she had built for herself and Lily. A dangerous game as the days passed. Sarah found herself caught in an unexpected whirlwind. Michael, the wealthy and influential CEO, continued to appear at the diner, offering Sarah assistance in ways that were both kind and generous. He sent groceries, arranged meetings, and even took an interest in Lily's life. For Sarah, this attention was both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, it was a relief to know that someone cared for her and her daughter. On the other hand, it made her question her worth. Was she truly deserving of this kind of help? The situation quickly took a darker turn when Sarah began receiving threatening messages. Someone was watching her and Lily, sending cryptic notes and packages, warning her to stay away from Michael. A stuffed bunny, a threatening message, and a series of strange occurrences began to build an unsettling atmosphere of fear and anxiety. As Sarah tried to make sense of the threats, she realized that the danger was not just personal, it was professional. The people behind the threats were connected to Michael's business dealings, and the stakes were far higher than she could have imagined. Cash and Holdings, a rival company, had taken notice of Sarah and Lily's connection to Michael, and they were willing to go to great lengths to exploit that connection for their own gain. Sarah was thrust into a world of corporate power struggles, deceit, and manipulation. The stakes had shifted from personal betrayal to corporate sabotage. She was no longer just a waitress at the Amber Diner. She was a pawn in a high-stakes game, and the players involved were willing to stop at nothing to get what they wanted. Rising above the betrayal, faced with the realization that she and Lily were caught in a dangerous web of corporate intrigue, Sarah had to make a choice. Would she continue to live in fear, hiding from the forces that sought to control her? Or would she rise above the betrayal, reclaim her power, and fight for justice? With the help of Michael and his security team, Sarah began to uncover the true extent of the conspiracy against her. They gathered evidence, tracked the movements of those behind the threats, and slowly but surely began to piece together the puzzle of what had happened. The rival company, Cash and Holdings, had orchestrated the entire scheme to force Michael into a corner. They had targeted Sarah and Lily as leverage, hoping to manipulate Michael into making business decisions that would benefit them. But Sarah was not someone who would be manipulated. The woman who had once been disrespected, underestimated, and betrayed was now rising to the challenge. She was no longer just a victim of circumstance. She was a fighter, a mother determined to protect her daughter at any cost. Reclaiming her power, the culmination of Sarah's journey came when the truth was finally exposed. With the evidence gathered by Michael's team, they were able to confront Cash and Holdings and their operatives, holding them accountable for the threats and manipulation they had orchestrated. The rival company was forced to back down, and the threat against Sarah and Lily was neutralized. Sarah had fought for her daughter's safety, her own dignity, and for justice. But more than that, she had fought for her future, the future she had always dreamed of, but had never thought possible. She had reclaimed her power, and in doing so, had transformed herself from a woman trapped in a life of betrayal to a force of strength, resilience, and empowerment. A new dawn in the end. Sarah's journey is a reminder that true strength lies not in wealth or influence, but in integrity, perseverance, and the will to do what is right. The path to justice is often long and fraught with difficulty, but it is a path worth taking. Through betrayal, adversity, and ultimate triumph, Sarah's story serves as an inspiration to all those who feel powerless, showing them that no matter how hard life may seem, it is never too late to rise above it. For American audiences, especially those who value the importance of integrity and justice, Sarah's story is a reflection of the power that lies within us all. It's a story that speaks to the resilience of a human spirit and the importance of standing up for what's right, no matter the odds. It is a story of redemption, empowerment, and the ultimate triumph of justice. Sarah's journey proves that even in the face of betrayal, we can find the strength to rise above, reclaim our power, and make a difference in the world. It is a story that will resonate with anyone who has ever been underestimated, disrespected, or abandoned, and it serves as a powerful reminder that, with enough courage and determination, we can all achieve the justice and empowerment we deserve. A story of transformation and redemption in life. We often find ourselves trapped by circumstances that shape our identity, dictate our decisions, and limit our potential. But sometimes something powerful happens. We begin to change, to transcend the very limitations that have held us back. Change is not easy. It can be painful, uncertain, and even terrifying. But it is through change that we discover who we truly are and what we are capable of. This is a story of change, of transformation from despair to empowerment, from betrayal to justice. It is a story of resilience, of standing tall even when the world around you seems to be falling apart. At the heart of this story is Sarah, a woman who faced the ultimate betrayal by her husband, James, and who later found herself in a battle against systemic corruption. Her journey is one of personal redemption, as she rises from the ashes of her past to reclaim her power and transform her life. Along the way, she discovers that true strength lies not in wealth, status, or external validation, but in the quiet courage to do what is right even when the odds are stacked against you. A life torn apart, Sarah's story begins in the quiet corners of a small town, where she lived with her husband James and their daughter, Lily. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. Sarah had a husband she thought she could trust, and a young daughter she cherished deeply. They had a modest but stable life, one that Sarah had worked hard to build. But as is often the case in life, appearances were deceiving. James, though outwardly charming, harbored a darker side. He was manipulative, controlling, and often cruel in ways that Sarah couldn't fully understand at the time. He constantly belittled her, mocked her dreams, and made her feel small and insignificant. She had been a young woman full of hope when they first married, but over the years, that hope slowly faded as James's true nature became clearer. His words cut deeper than any physical wound, leaving scars on Sarah's self-esteem that she would struggle to heal for years to come. But the real betrayal came when James walked out on Sarah and Lily without a word, leaving them to fend for themselves. It was the ultimate act of abandonment, and it shattered Sarah in ways she had never anticipated. The man she had once trusted had disappeared without a trace, leaving her to pick up the pieces of her life. Her heart ached, not just from the pain of being left behind, but from the shame and confusion of not understanding why it had happened in the first place. James had been the center of her world, and now, with him gone, Sarah felt utterly lost. She was left to navigate life as a single mother, with no financial security, no emotional support, and no idea how to move forward. Her dreams seemed distant and unattainable, as she often found herself questioning her worth. How could she have been so blind? How could she have allowed herself to be trapped in such a toxic relationship for so long? Yet, despite the overwhelming pain, Sarah had one thing she could cling to: her daughter, Lily. Lily was the light in Sarah's dark world, the reason she got out of bed each day, the reason she kept pushing forward. It was for Lily that Sarah learned to survive, to endure, to keep going even when every fiber of her being screamed for rest. She loved her daughter with every ounce of her being, and though life had not turned out the way she had imagined, she was determined to make sure that Lily would never know the pain Sarah had endured. A new life begins. The first few years after James left were tough. Sarah had no choice but to find work wherever she could, and the only job that seemed available to her was as a waitress at a small diner called Amber Diner. It wasn't glamorous by any stretch of the imagination, but it was a job, and it paid the bills. Sarah's days were filled with long hours on her feet, taking orders, serving food, and dealing with difficult customers. She often worked double shifts, sometimes late into the night, just to make ends meet. The diner, though modest, became a place of solace for Sarah. It was a place where she could lose herself in the routine of her work, a place where she didn't have to think about her past or the future she couldn't control. The other waitstaff were kind, but Sarah didn't allow herself to get close to anyone. She kept to herself, focused on her work, and did her best to keep her head down. The life she had once dreamed of, one filled with love, happiness, and success, seemed as distant as a far-off star. But then, one day, everything changed. It started with a simple interaction. A man named Michael Davenport walked into Amber Diner. He was unlike anyone Sarah had ever seen. He was tall, well-dressed, and exuded an air of quiet confidence that seemed out of place in the humble diner. His presence was commanding, yet understated. He was the kind of man who could walk into any room and instantly make it feel as though he belonged there. But for Sarah, the moment she saw him, she couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to happen. Michael ordered a drink, and Sarah took his order as she had done countless times before with other customers. But this time, something was different. She found herself drawn to him in a way she couldn't explain. There was an air of mystery about him, a sense that he was not just another customer passing through. And when Lily, who had been coloring quietly in the corner, suddenly ran up to him and threw her arms around his waist, calling him Daddy. The entire diner fell into stunned silence. At that moment, Sarah's world seemed to stop. Her heart raced as she rushed to pull Lily away from the man, terrified of what had just happened. But to her surprise, Michael did not react with anger or confusion. Instead, he looked at Lily with a mixture of shock and something else, something Sarah couldn't quite name. His expression softened, and he gently placed a hand on Lily's back as she clung to him. The entire diner was watching, waiting for Michael's response. Sarah, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, rushed to pull Lily away. But before she could say anything, Michael spoke softly, asking if Lily's name was really Lily. Sarah, still in shock, nodded, unsure of what to say next. The tension in the air was palpable, and for a moment, it seemed as though everything Sarah had known was unraveling before her eyes. Secrets unveiled in the days that followed, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Lily's innocent mistake had set something in motion, something Sarah wasn't sure she was ready to confront. Michael continued to come to the diner, and each time he did, he made a point to speak with Sarah, offering her help in ways that made her feel both grateful and uncomfortable. He bought groceries, gave her money to cover expenses, and even began to show an interest in Lily's life. But Sarah couldn't understand why. Why was this man, a successful and powerful CEO, so invested in her and her daughter? What did he want from them? Was it simply charity, or was there something more at play? As the days went by, the mystery deepened. Michael had made it clear that he was willing to help, but Sarah's sense of independence made her wary. She had been abandoned before, and she wasn't sure she was ready to trust anyone again. But as time went on, she began to see something different in Michael's eyes, a genuine care for her and Lily, a willingness to help without any expectations in return. However, the threats soon escalated. It began with anonymous phone calls, then packages left at the diner. Each package contained cryptic messages warning Sarah to stay away from Michael. The more she tried to distance herself from him, the more the threats intensified. It became clear that someone was watching her, trying to intimidate her into cutting ties with Michael. The threats weren't just about her, they were about something bigger, something connected to Michael's work. Rising above when the threats turned into a full-blown attack, Sarah knew she had to take action. Michael, who had been quietly working behind the scenes to protect her, revealed the truth. The threats were coming from a rival company, Cashin Holdings, which had connections to Michael's business dealings. Cashin's CEO had been targeting Michael for years, trying to undermine his success through underhanded tactics. But now, with Sarah and Lily caught in the crossfire, the stakes were higher than ever. It was no longer just about Sarah's survival. It was about justice. It was about standing up to the forces that sought to manipulate and control her. With Michael's help, Sarah fought back. She gathered evidence, confronted the people behind the threats, and exposed the corruption within Cashin Holdings. Through it all, Sarah learned something invaluable. That true strength comes not from power or wealth, but from integrity, resilience, and the courage to fight for what is right. Reclaiming power in the end, Sarah's story is one of redemption. She went from being a woman broken by betrayal to a force of change, standing up to the systems that had oppressed her. Through her courage, she reclaimed her life and her power. She did not allow herself to be defined by her past or her circumstances. Instead, she used her experiences to fuel her fight for justice, proving that no matter how difficult the journey, it is always possible to rise above. Her victory is a testament to the power of resilience and integrity. It is a reminder that even when life seems impossible, we can find the strength to persevere and reclaim what is rightfully ours. For Sarah, the road to redemption was long and difficult, but in the end, it was worth every step. In the world of corporate power struggles, personal betrayal, and systemic corruption, Sarah's story stands as a beacon of hope. It is a reminder that change is possible and that we all have the power to rise above our circumstances, no matter how challenging they may seem. A new beginning for Sarah. The journey is far from over. Though the immediate threat has passed, there is still much work to be done. She is no longer the woman she was at the beginning of the story. She is stronger, more confident, and more determined than ever before. And as she continues to navigate the complexities of life, she knows that she will never again be a victim of betrayal or manipulation. She has found her voice, and she will continue to fight for the justice and empowerment she and her daughter deserve. Sarah's story is one of transformation, redemption, and empowerment. It is a story that resonates with all of us, especially those who have faced hardship, betrayal, and loss. It is a story of resilience, of finding strength when we least expect it, and of reclaiming the power that is rightfully ours. A journey of self-discovery and empowerment in life. We often encounter moments that challenge us to the core, moments where we must confront our deepest fears, weaknesses, and unresolved emotions. These are the moments that either break us or build us into the individuals we are destined to become. The story of Sarah is one such moment. A journey that begins in the most unlikely of places, with a simple encounter, but unfolds into a story of second chances, resilience, and the ultimate discovery of what it truly means to empower oneself against the odds. At the heart of Sarah's story is her transformation, a shift from being the woman she once was, a woman battered by betrayal and left in the cold, to a powerful, determined force in her own right. This is the story of how Sarah learns that the path to empowerment is often a winding, challenging one, but it is always possible to reclaim what was once lost. A life in pieces before Sarah's life was upended. She was just like any other working mother trying to make ends meet. She had a simple life in a small apartment with her daughter, Lily, and her husband, James. On the outside, everything seemed perfect, but beneath the surface, Sarah's world was far from ideal. She had become accustomed to the subtle manipulations of James, who constantly undermined her, belittled her achievements, and took advantage of her kindness. The love that once seemed to bind them together had faded over the years, replaced with resentment and silent suffering. James was a man who thrived on control. He used his words like daggers to cut Sarah down, leaving her questioning her worth and her place in the world. He made her feel as though she were nothing more than a servant, existing only to meet his needs and desires. Despite the years of humiliation, Sarah never fully understood how deeply the emotional abuse had affected her until the day he walked out. He left without so much as a goodbye, abandoning her and their young daughter to fend for themselves. At first, the shock of James's departure was overwhelming. Sarah could not fathom how her life had turned so dark so quickly. She was left in a state of disarray, grappling with the reality of being a single mother, struggling to provide for Lily, and dealing with the emotional fallout of being betrayed by the one person she had trusted most. But as the days turned into weeks, Sarah realized she had no choice but to carry on. Her daughter needed her, and despite her heartbreak, she found the strength to keep moving forward. She had no one to lean on, no one to help her pick up the pieces, but she did what any mother would do. She fought for her daughter, and she fought for her dignity. Sarah found a job at Amber Diner, the only place that had been willing to hire her despite her lack of qualifications. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was steady. She worked long hours, serving food, refilling coffee cups, and cleaning up after the busy breakfast rush. It wasn't the life Sarah had envisioned for herself, but it was a life. A simple, predictable life where she could just exist without the crushing weight of emotional abuse. But even in the midst of routine, something was missing. Sarah felt unfulfilled, yearning for a life beyond the mundane. She longed for connection, for a sense of purpose that didn't involve serving strangers who barely noticed her. Yet, she pushed these feelings aside because, in her mind, they were luxuries she could no longer afford. She had to focus on surviving, on ensuring that Lily had what she needed, and on keeping up appearances. The moment that changed everything changed when Michael Davenport walked into Amber Diner one fateful morning. Michael was different. There was an air of confidence about him, a quiet assurance that came not from his wealth or status, but from the way he carried himself. He didn't need to announce his presence. It was evident in the way he moved, in the calm demeanor he exuded, and in the way the other customers responded to him. Sarah, like any good waitress, approached his table with her usual politeness, but something about Michael intrigued her. He wasn't like the usual customers. There was a depth to him, a mystery that Sarah couldn't quite place. She tried to ignore the curiosity that stirred within her as she took his order, but it was impossible. There was something magnetic about him, something that made her want to know more. It wasn't until Lily, who had been coloring quietly in the corner, approached Michael with the innocence only a child could possess, that the truth of the moment became clear. Lily, without warning, ran up to Michael, threw her arms around his waist, and called him Daddy. The entire diner fell silent. Sarah's heart stopped. What in the world was happening? How could Lily possibly mistake this man for a father? Sarah rushed over, pulling her daughter away from Michael with a mixture of embarrassment and panic. But instead of rejecting Lily, Michael's expression softened. He didn't push the child away. Instead, he looked at her with a tenderness that surprised Sarah, and after a long pause, he asked, "Is your name Lily?" Sarah, flustered and confused, nodded. The silence in the diner was deafening. All eyes were on them, waiting for Michael's response. What would he do? Would he react with anger? Would he demand an explanation? But instead, Michael simply smiled gently and nodded as if something significant had just occurred. It was at that moment that Sarah's life began to shift. This simple, unexpected encounter set in motion a series of events that would lead her to a deeper understanding of herself, her worth, and her capacity to change. Facing the past over the next few days, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed within her. Michael began to visit the diner regularly, and with each visit, he seemed to take a special interest in her and Lily. At first, Sarah was hesitant to accept his kindness. She didn't trust easily, especially after the betrayal she had suffered from James. But Michael didn't pressure her. He didn't demand anything in return. He simply wanted to help. He bought groceries for Sarah and Lily, paid for their meals, and even left generous tips. He didn't make her feel indebted, but instead treated her with a respect and kindness that was foreign to her. The more she interacted with him, the more she realized that Michael wasn't like the men she had known in her life. He wasn't manipulative or controlling. He was genuine, compassionate, and most surprisingly interested in building a relationship based on trust, not charity. As their relationship developed, Sarah found herself slowly opening up to him. She shared her story, the pain of her past, the struggles she faced as a single mother, and the fear that had gripped her since James left. Michael listened without judgment, offering her the understanding she had so desperately needed. His support was not just material, it was emotional. He made her feel seen, heard, and valued in a way that no one had ever done before. But it wasn't until the threats began that Sarah realized just how deeply her life had changed. Someone was watching her, leaving threatening messages at the diner, warning her to stay away from Michael. The threats escalated quickly, turning from vague warnings to direct attacks. It became clear that someone wanted Sarah to cut ties with Michael, but Sarah couldn't understand why. She had no idea what kind of danger they were in, but she knew that something was wrong. Standing up to fear, Michael revealed the truth. The threats were coming from a rival company, Cashin Holdings, which had been attempting to undermine his business for years. Cashin CEO had been using every tactic at his disposal to sabotage Michael's success, and now they had extended their reach to Sarah and Lily. The threats against Sarah were not personal, they were a form of corporate manipulation, a way to control Michael through fear. It was in this moment that Sarah found her true strength. She could have walked away, could have let Michael handle the situation on his own, but she didn't. She chose to fight. She chose to stand up to the fear that had controlled her life for so long. She chose to be brave, to be the woman she had always wanted to be, the woman who could face her fears and fight for what was right. With Michael's help, Sarah gathered evidence, uncovered the truth behind the threats, and exposed the corruption within Cashin Holdings. She fought back against the forces that sought to control her, and in doing so, she reclaimed her power. The experience was both terrifying and liberating, but it taught Sarah something invaluable. That true empowerment comes not from what others think of you, but from your ability to trust yourself and take action in the face of adversity. A new beginning in the end, Sarah emerged victorious. She not only uncovered the truth about the people who had been manipulating her, but she also discovered something about herself, something she had never known before. She was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. She was strong, resilient, and powerful, and she had the ability to shape her own destiny. With Michael's support, Sarah began to rebuild her life. She took control of her finances, her career, and her future. She no longer saw herself as a victim of circumstance, but as a woman who had the power to create her own opportunities. She made decisions based on her values, not out of fear or desperation, and for the first time in a long while, she felt free. But the greatest victory of all was the relationship she had built with Lily. Sarah no longer saw herself as a woman trapped in a difficult situation. She was a mother who had reclaimed her life and her power, and in doing so, she had given Lily a future filled with hope, possibility, and love. Empowerment through change. Sarah's story is one of transformation, a journey from victimhood to empowerment, from betrayal to justice. It is a story of resilience, strength, and the power of second chances. It teaches us that no matter how difficult our circumstances may seem, we always have the power to change, to grow, and to reclaim our lives. For Sarah, that journey began with a simple moment of connection, a chance encounter with a man who showed her kindness when she least expected it. But didn't end there. The road ahead was filled with challenges, but it was through those challenges that Sarah discovered her true strength. She realized that empowerment comes from within, and that when we choose to face our fears, we open the door to a life of limitless possibilities. This is a story that resonates with all of us. It reminds us that no matter how far we may fall, there is always a way back. It shows us that through adversity, we can find our truest selves, and it inspires us to keep moving forward, no matter what life throws our way. In the end, Sarah's story is not just her own, it is a story for all of us. It is a reminder that change is possible, that transformation is real, and that we all have the power to write our own stories. A journey of power, justice, and the ultimate transformation in a world where the struggle for power and survival often feels like an endless battle. The story of a woman who reclaims her identity, exposes corruption, and takes control of her life becomes not only a source of inspiration, but a reminder that true strength lies within us all. This is the story of Sarah, a woman once betrayed by those she loved, but ultimately reborn into the powerful, empowered CEO she was always meant to be. It is the tale of her transformation from a disrespected, underestimated wife into a leader capable of shifting the tides in a ruthless corporate world. Sarah's journey is filled with moments of grief, anger, astonishment, and ultimately, a deep sense of relief and satisfaction as she takes back what was stolen from her: her dignity, her strength, and her sense of purpose. It is the kind of story that resonates with anyone who has ever felt silenced, disempowered, or forgotten, especially in a world that constantly underestimates the resilience of those who have been wronged. For Sarah, her path to empowerment was paved with sacrifice, patience, and strategic thinking, and in the end, her story is one of redemption, justice, and the power of perseverance. A life built on lies and betrayal at the start of Sarah's story. She was just like many other women, a mother, a wife, and a seemingly invisible part of the corporate machine. She had sacrificed everything for her family and her marriage, working tirelessly to keep things running smoothly at home while her husband, James, climbed the corporate ladder. James was the man she had once adored, the man she believed in and supported, but he had long since become a stranger to her. The man she thought she married was now an arrogant, selfish person who treated her as little more than an accessory in his life. Sarah's marriage was a toxic cycle of abuse, manipulation, and emotional neglect. James, a powerful executive in a large company, had used his position to belittle Sarah and ensure that she never stood a chance to grow beyond her role as his wife. Over the years, he had mocked her ambitions, dismissed her talents, and quietly undermined any effort she made to pursue her own dreams. Yet, she stood by him, convinced that one day he would recognize her worth. But that day never came. For years, Sarah had been a passive participant in her own life, subjugating herself to the whims of James and his colleagues. She tolerated their cruel jokes, their underestimation of her, and their constant disregard for her intelligence and capabilities. She knew she was capable of more. She had the potential to be a leader, to run a company, to make an impact, but James had made sure she was locked in a gilded cage of doubt and dependency. She had no formal education, no references, no network to support her, and no place to turn. But despite the constant emotional battering, Sarah kept going. She had a daughter, Lily, to raise. She had to survive. The moment of truth came when Sarah discovered that James had been having an affair with one of his colleagues, a woman who had been a constant presence at corporate events. The shock of this revelation was like a bomb going off in Sarah's life. She felt humiliated, betrayed, and utterly alone. But there was a small flicker of something inside her, a spark of anger, of determination, that had been lying dormant for too long. For the first time in years, she was no longer willing to remain a passive victim. She was going to take control. A mother's determination to reclaim her life, the discovery of James's infidelity, was the catalyst that set Sarah on a path towards self-empowerment. But what truly set her apart was the fierce love she had for her daughter, Lily. Sarah knew that in order to create a better life for her daughter, she needed to first create a better life for herself. It wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming her power and giving Lily the role model she deserved, a strong, empowered woman who refused to be kept down. In the face of rejection, betrayal, and abandonment, Sarah slowly began to piece together the parts of herself she had long neglected. She started by looking at her skills, her talents, and the intelligence she had been forced to hide for so many years. Sarah realized that her years of experience managing the household, budgeting, and making decisions for her family had given her a unique set of skills that could be applied to the corporate world. But she couldn't do it alone. The first step toward rebuilding her life came when she found work at Amber Diner, a small, local restaurant that was known for its hearty breakfasts and homey atmosphere. While the work was far from glamorous, it gave Sarah the opportunity to start over. She began to build confidence in herself again, even if the path forward was uncertain. It wasn't a career that fulfilled her dreams of leadership, but it was a step toward independence and self-sufficiency. However, as the days went on, Sarah realized that her new life was just a stepping stone, a temporary holding place while she figured out her next move. As the manager of the diner, she learned how to navigate complex personalities, handle difficult customers, and make decisions on the fly. She discovered a renewed sense of purpose in these small tasks, and for the first time in years, she began to feel like she was in control of her life. But it wasn't just the physical work that transformed her. It was the mental shift. As Sarah focused on her own survival and started building confidence, she realized that she had been given the opportunity for a new beginning. She was no longer the disrespected wife who had been cast aside. She was a woman on the brink of something greater, and she could already feel the power bubbling up inside her. Meeting Michael, Sarah's life began to change in ways she never expected when she met Michael Davenport, a businessman who came into the diner one morning. Michael, with his tailored suit and quiet confidence, exuded a kind of power that Sarah had never seen in her life. He wasn't just another customer. There was something about him that made Sarah feel like her life was about to take a turn. At first, Sarah was hesitant. She had been burned by men in the past, and she didn't trust easily. But Michael was different. He didn't treat her like a subordinate or an object. He treated her with respect, offering her kindness without any expectation in return. He took the time to listen to her, to understand her struggles, and to offer support in small but meaningful ways. The more Sarah got to know him, the more she realized that he wasn't like the other men who had belittled her. But what truly changed Sarah's life was the moment her daughter, Lily, ran up to Michael and called him Daddy. It was a moment of pure innocence and connection, and it triggered something inside Sarah. She could see that Michael was different. He was someone who could offer Lily the father figure she had long been without. It was in this moment that Sarah began to see the potential for a future that was far different from the one she had been trapped in for so long. Michael's presence in Sarah's life became a turning point. With his encouragement, Sarah started to envision a future where she could take control of her life, where she could reclaim the power that had been stripped from her by her marriage. But it wasn't just Michael's support that propelled Sarah forward, it was her own inner strength, the determination to fight for justice, to confront the past, and to take the lead in her own life. Reclaiming power and seeking justice as Sarah's relationship with Michael deepened, so did the dangers that loomed in her life. She found herself in a battle not just against the corporate forces that had sought to manipulate and control her, but also against the ghosts of her past. The world of corporate intrigue, power struggles, and betrayal was not an easy one to navigate. Sarah was thrown into the thick of it, forced to confront her fears head-on. But instead of running, Sarah decided to stand tall. She knew that the only way to truly reclaim her life and her future was to fight for it. With Michael by her side, Sarah began to use her intelligence and strategic thinking to expose the corruption at the highest levels of the company. She started making moves, one by one, to take back what was hers, to expose the lies, the manipulation, and the greed that had fueled her downfall. Her journey wasn't easy, but it was necessary. Sarah faced countless obstacles, including threats, manipulations, and moments of doubt. But each challenge only fueled her determination to succeed. With every step, she dismantled the web of corruption that had held her back, refusing to let anyone stand in her way. By the end of her journey, Sarah had reclaimed her place at the head of the table. She had exposed the truth, brought justice to those who had wronged her, and emerged as a powerful CEO in her own right. Her story was no longer one of betrayal and submission. It was one of victory, empowerment, and self-discovery. A new dawn. Sarah's story is a testament to the power of second chances, to the resilience of a human spirit, and to the transformative power of justice. It is a story of a woman who refused to let betrayal and hardship define her. She found her strength in the face of adversity, and through her journey, she became the woman she was always meant to be. This is not just Sarah's story. It is the story of every person who has ever been knocked down, silenced, or underestimated. It is a story of triumph over adversity, of finding your voice and your power, and of never giving up, no matter how difficult the road may seem. For Sarah, the future is now hers to shape, and it is a future filled with possibilities, hope, and the strength to overcome anything that comes her way. Her journey is a reminder that no matter how dark the past may be, we all have the power to rise from the ashes and build a brighter, stronger tomorrow. A journey of hope, transformation, and unyielding strength in a world where personal ambition, betrayal, and the search for justice collide. Some individuals are destined to rise above the constraints that have once held them down. Such is the story of Sarah, a woman who once languished under the weight of society's expectations and the betrayal of those closest to her, but found within herself the courage to reclaim her identity, fight for her daughter, and ultimately achieve empowerment and justice. Sarah's journey is one of resilience, heartbreak, hope, and self-discovery, a story that resonates with all those who have ever been underestimated or underestimated their own potential. From the moment Sarah's life is irrevocably altered by betrayal, her transformation is set in motion. In the face of unimaginable challenges, she begins to reconstruct not just her identity, but her place in a world that had once only seen her as an extension of someone else's life. Her story is an inspiring one, showcasing the immense strength that comes from personal hardship and the ability to rewrite one's future even when everything seems lost. By finding her voice, reclaiming her power, and ensuring that her story is told on her own terms, Sarah's journey is a beacon of hope for anyone who feels caught in the web of societal pressures or toxic relationships. A life built on illusions. Sarah's journey begins in a place many can relate to, a place where the dreams of a bright future seem shattered by the harsh realities of life. As a young woman, Sarah had always been taught to work hard, follow the rules, and be patient for rewards that would come in time. She married James, a successful and charismatic man who, on the surface, appear to be the perfect partner. However, as the years went by, Sarah began to realize that her marriage, much like her life, was built on an illusion. She was bound by societal expectations, confined to the role of the supportive wife, and denied the opportunity to pursue her own aspirations. The life Sarah had imagined for herself began to dissolve as James' ambitions grew, and his disregard for her needs became more apparent. What started as subtle neglect turned into full-blown emotional and verbal abuse. James, now a powerful figure in the corporate world, believed his success entitled him to treat Sarah as though she were little more than a background figure in his life. He undermined her at every turn, belittled her for her lack of formal education, and made her feel as though she were undeserving of the very life she had once dreamed of. Yet, despite these growing frustrations, Sarah remained silent, unable to voice the fears and frustrations that grew within her. She had been taught that a woman's role was to support, to be patient, and to wait for her time to come. As a mother to their young daughter, Lily, Sarah's primary concern was the well-being of her child. Still, she was trapped. She had no job, no education, and no family who could support her. Her every move seemed dictated by James' expectations. It wasn't until the day that everything came crashing down that Sarah realized she could no longer accept this life. Moment of betrayal, the turning point in Sarah's life, came in the form of betrayal. She discovered that James had been having an affair for years with one of his colleagues, a woman who had risen to a position of power in his company. The truth cut deeply. Sarah had long suspected that something was wrong, but the confirmation of her suspicions left her devastated. It wasn't just the affair that shattered her, it was the realization that James had never truly valued her, had never truly seen her as a partner in his life, but rather as an accessory to his success. In that moment, something within Sarah shifted. The years of silence, the years of being the quiet, obedient wife, suddenly felt suffocating. She was no longer willing to accept the status quo. This betrayal, this break in the illusion of their perfect life, was the catalyst that forced Sarah to confront her reality and take action. It was time to reclaim her life, to rebuild her identity, and to fight not just for herself but for her daughter's future. As the days after the betrayal unfolded, Sarah was faced with a harsh reality. She had nothing left. She had no career, no network of support, and no confidence in herself. But what she did have was a burning desire to change. With nothing to lose, she began to plan her escape from the suffocating marriage. It wasn't just about leaving James, it was about leaving behind the woman she had become in his shadow. She had to find herself again. Rediscovering strength and purpose, Sarah's journey toward empowerment did not begin with a grand, sweeping change. Rather, it started with small, often difficult decisions that marked the first steps in her transformation. She decided to go back to work. The prospect of finding a job was daunting, but it was the only way forward. She applied to the Amber Diner, a small family-owned restaurant, and, with little experience and no references, managed to secure a position as a waitress. It wasn't much, but it was a start. While Sarah initially felt self-conscious and out of place in her new role, she quickly realized that the work, though difficult, gave her a sense of autonomy she hadn't felt in years. The hours were long, the tips were modest, and the work was exhausting, but Sarah was determined. She made it through each day by focusing on her daughter's well-being and the hope that one day she would have more. She had no formal education, no family wealth to fall back on, and no prestigious connections, but she had something more valuable, a burning desire to succeed. At the diner, Sarah met Michael, a successful businessman who had come in for breakfast one morning. He was well-dressed, confident, and seemingly out of place in the small, local eatery. There was something magnetic about him, and Sarah couldn't help but notice the way he carried himself with quiet power. When Michael asked Sarah about her life, her work, and her dreams, it was the first time in years that someone had shown real interest in her as a person. For the first time in ages, Sarah felt seen. But what truly set Michael apart from others was his empathy. He didn't treat Sarah as an object to be pitted, but as a woman capable of making her own decisions. Michael saw something in Sarah that even she had stopped seeing in herself: potential. And while their relationship started as a chance encounter between a businessman and a waitress, it quickly blossomed into something more. Michael's respect for Sarah, his belief in her, and his encouragement were the first real steps in her journey toward reclaiming her identity and pursuing her dreams. Empowerment through strategic action. With Michael's support, Sarah began to envision a future in which she could take control of her life. However, as she began to regain her sense of self-worth and confidence, the obstacles she faced became increasingly daunting. The world she had entered was one of ruthless corporate power plays, corruption, and manipulation. And in order to secure her future, Sarah would need to confront these forces head-on. The transformation from a quiet, disrespected wife into a powerful, decisive CEO did not come easily. It required not just mental fortitude, but strategic action. As Sarah worked to rebuild her life, she was also learning to navigate a world of high-stakes business and corporate warfare. But Sarah was determined. She began to sharpen her skills, honing in on her ability to make critical decisions, manage people, and craft strategies that would ultimately propel her to the top. But it wasn't just her professional life that needed attention, it was also her personal life. Sarah had to reconcile the woman she had been with the woman she was becoming. She had spent years being controlled by the men in her life, her husband, her colleagues, and society at large, but now she was in charge. The power she had gained was not just a professional achievement. It was a deeply personal victory. She had become the woman she had always wanted to be. The woman she had always known was inside her, but had been hidden away by years of doubt, fear, and external control. Reclaiming power and justice as Sarah fought her way to the top, she found herself not just dismantling the power structures that had kept her in the shadows, but also exposing the corruption at the heart of James' company. In a moment of high drama, Sarah revealed the deep ties between her husband's company and a group of corrupt executives who had been exploiting their workers for years. The board members, those who had once mocked Sarah and belittled her intelligence, now found themselves staring down the consequences of their actions. Sarah used her newfound power to bring them to justice, ensuring that their unethical practices would not go unpunished. In the process, Sarah not only gained the respect of her colleagues, but also became a symbol of empowerment for other women who had felt disrespected or invisible in their own lives. She proved that it was possible to rise above the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the injustice, and that it was never too late to take control of one's destiny. Her victory was not just a professional triumph, it was a personal one as well. Sarah had fought not just for her career, but for the life she had always dreamed of. She had rebuilt herself from the ground up, reclaiming the power that had been taken from her and ensuring that her daughter would grow up in a world where her mother was a role model of strength, integrity, and resilience. The power of perseverance and transformation. Sarah's story is one of immense transformation, and it serves as a reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always the possibility of a new beginning. It is a story of resilience, of hope, and of the unyielding strength that can be found within when we are pushed to the edge. For anyone who has ever been betrayed, underestimated, or silenced, Sarah's journey offers a powerful message. It's never too late to reclaim your power, rewrite your story, and stand tall in the face of adversity. By reclaiming her life, Sarah not only found her own voice, but she also ensured that the voices of other women who had been silenced would be heard as well. Her story is one of hope, empowerment, and the triumph of justice, and it will inspire all who hear it to believe in their own capacity for transformation and change. Because at the end of the day, the greatest power lies within ourselves, and when we find the courage to embrace that power, there is nothing we cannot achieve. The rise of a powerful CEO, the story of a disrespected wife who rises from the shadows of her husband's betrayal to become a powerful, decisive CEO, is a tale that resonates deeply with those who have faced hardships in life. For many, the themes of betrayal, empowerment, and justice echo the experiences of overcoming adversity, navigating difficult relationships, and standing firm in the pursuit of one's dreams. This is the story of Sarah, a woman who, after years of humiliation and mistreatment, transforms into a force to be reckoned with in the corporate world, exposing corruption and restoring justice for those who have been wronged. This narrative explores the raw emotions of astonishment, anger, inspiration, relief, and sadness. It emphasizes that regardless of one's circumstances, it is possible to rise above betrayal and emerge stronger, more determined, and more powerful than ever before. This story does not just highlight corporate power struggles, but also offers a personal journey of growth and self-empowerment. The tale of Sarah's transformation is not only about overcoming professional hurdles, but also about healing the emotional wounds caused by years of disrespect and unappreciated loyalty. A life of humiliation, Sarah's journey begins in the dark confines of a life built on unspoken expectations and the weight of humiliation. As a young woman, Sarah married James, a man whose charm and success initially blinded her to the faults lurking beneath the surface. In the early years of their marriage, she believed that love, hard work, and devotion would eventually lead to a fulfilling life. However, as time passed, she began to see the cracks in their relationship. James, consumed by his ambitions, gradually turned into a man who treated Sarah like an afterthought, no longer a partner, but merely a fixture in his life. James had risen to a high level of success in his career, but with success came arrogance. He mocked Sarah's lack of formal education and belittled her dreams. His treatment of her was demeaning and cruel, and Sarah, for the most part, swallowed her pain in silence. She focused all her energy on being the perfect wife and mother to their daughter, Lily, hoping that one day James would recognize her sacrifices and love her for the person she was. However, instead of support, Sarah received mockery and disdain. She was no longer seen as an equal, but as someone whose dreams were not important enough to be taken seriously. Yet, Sarah's greatest challenge was not James' neglect, but his complete lack of respect for her. She spent years trying to win his approval, taking on roles that demanded everything of her, only to be met with more disdain. There were times when she would look at her reflection in the mirror and wonder how she had lost herself in a relationship that once seemed full of promise. The dreams she once had of becoming a successful professional, of achieving something on her own, felt like distant memories. She had become someone she didn't recognize, a shadow of the woman she once aspired to be. The unveiling of the truth, the moment of awakening, came when Sarah discovered that James had been having an affair. The betrayal hit her like a ton of bricks, and the walls of her carefully constructed world came crashing down. Not only had James broken the trust of their marriage, but he had also deceived her in ways she could never have imagined. Sarah's discovery of the affair made her question everything she had believed about their relationship. It wasn't just that James had been unfaithful, it was that he had betrayed her in the most intimate and hurtful way possible. He had taken advantage of her loyalty, her commitment, and her sacrifices while he carried on an affair behind her back. In that moment of revelation, Sarah realized something profound. She had spent years trying to please someone who would never appreciate her. She had been invisible in the eyes of the very person she had devoted her life to. For Sarah, this was the moment of reckoning. She could no longer remain in the shadows of her husband's success and pretend that everything was fine. She had been humiliated, and the time had come for her to reclaim her dignity, her sense of self, and her future. This betrayal was the wake-up call she needed to stop being a passive bystander in her own life. The truth hurt deeply, but it also ignited a fire within Sarah. For the first time, she realized that she was capable of so much more than she had ever imagined. The years of being ignored, belittled, and mocked had eroded her self-confidence, but the betrayal sparked a realization that she had the power to change her own fate. It was not enough to simply walk away from James. It was time to rebuild her life on her own terms. Rising from the ashes, the road to empowerment was not an easy one for Sarah. After confronting James about his affair, she found herself alone, without the support of her husband and no financial resources to rely on. Sarah had no formal education, no connections, and no job to speak of. She had spent the better part of her life as a housewife and mother, and now she found herself facing an uncertain future. It would have been easy to fall into despair, but Sarah chose to take control of her life and transform her circumstances. The first step in her journey was finding a job. She applied to the Amber Diner, a modest restaurant in the town, and began working as a waitress. It wasn't glamorous, and the pay was minimal, but it was a start. For the first time in years, Sarah was in control of her own destiny. She worked tirelessly to prove herself, picking up shifts whenever possible and saving every penny. It wasn't much, but it was a foundation for the life she wanted to build. Over time, Sarah began to feel a sense of pride in her work. She was no longer defined by her marriage or her relationship with James. She was her own person, with her own ambitions and desires. But as Sarah gained confidence in her new role, she also started to realize that she had a lot more to offer than simply serving food at a diner. She began to see herself in a new light, not as someone who was invisible or dependent on others, but as someone capable of achieving great things. From waitress to CEO, it wasn't long before Sarah caught the attention of Michael, a businessman who frequented the diner. Michael was well-dressed, confident, and powerful, everything that Sarah had once thought was out of reach. He seemed to see something in Sarah that others had overlooked. He noticed her potential, her intelligence, and her determination. Michael became a mentor to Sarah, encouraging her to pursue her dreams and helping her navigate the world of business. Under Michael's guidance, Sarah began to develop the skills she needed to succeed in the corporate world. He introduced her to business strategies, helped her sharpen her leadership abilities, and encouraged her to take bold risks. As Sarah learned more about the business world, she began to realize that her real strength lay not just in her ability to work hard, but in her ability to make strategic decisions, manage people, and lead with integrity. The skills that she had honed during her years of running a household and managing her family now serve her well in the corporate world. With Michael's support and mentorship, Sarah took her first steps toward becoming a CEO. She was hired by a company that Michael had connections to and quickly rose through the ranks. Her hard work, determination, and strategic thinking set her apart from the other executives in the company, and within a few years, she found herself sitting at the head of the table as the CEO of a thriving business. Exposing corruption and restoring justice as Sarah's career advanced, so did the stakes. She soon discovered that her husband's company, the one that had once humiliated her, was involved in widespread corruption. The very people who had once mocked her for not being good enough were now the ones responsible for perpetuating unethical practices in the corporate world. Sarah saw this as her opportunity not just to expose the corruption, but to restore justice for all those who had been harmed by it. She carefully orchestrated a series of events that would expose the corrupt executives within the company. She gathered evidence, built a case, and slowly but surely brought the truth to light. The corrupt executives, including James, were forced to answer for their actions. Sarah made sure that the victims of their greed and exploitation were compensated, and that the toxic culture within the company was replaced with one of fairness, transparency, and integrity. As the corrupt executives were brought down, Sarah's victory was not just one of professional success. It was a deeply personal triumph. She had reclaimed her life, her dignity, and her future. The woman who had once been invisible, belittled, and mocked was now the woman who stood at the top, leading with strength, wisdom, and compassion. The power of transformation. Sarah's story is one of extraordinary transformation. It shows that even in the face of betrayal and hardship, it is possible to rise above and reclaim one's power. Her journey from a disrespected wife to a powerful CEO is a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the power of perseverance. Through her story, we learn that empowerment doesn't come from external validation, it comes from within. It is the ability to trust in yourself, even when others doubt you. It is the courage to take risks, to stand up for what is right, and to fight for your dreams, no matter how impossible they may seem. Sarah's journey is a reminder that true strength lies in resilience, integrity, and the unwavering belief that we can create our own destiny. For anyone who has ever felt overlooked, underestimated, or betrayed, Sarah's story is a powerful reminder that it is never too late to change your life. The future is not written in stone, it is shaped by the choices we make, the actions we take, and the courage we summon in the face of adversity. Like Sarah, we all have the power to rise, to transform, and to achieve the life we deserve. From devotion to leadership in the world of Buddhism, the path of self-discovery, spiritual awakening, and ultimate leadership is often paved with immense challenges and profound realizations. This journey is not only about deepening one's understanding of the self, but is also about guiding others toward inner peace and enlightenment. The story of a 40-year-old Japanese Buddhist monk, the abbot, is a testament to the power of faith, discipline, and the wisdom of a life dedicated to the pursuit of truth. It is a story that is particularly poignant in today's fast-paced and often chaotic world, where many are seeking balance, purpose, and direction. The path of this monk is not one of isolation and withdrawal from society, but rather one of deep involvement and engagement with the world, offering wisdom and guidance to those who seek it. As the abbot of a Buddhist temple, his role is both a spiritual and leadership one, providing teachings that resonate with individuals from all walks of life, particularly in the modern world, where the need for mindfulness, compassion, and ethical living is more urgent than ever. Early life and the call to serve. The story of the Japanese Buddhist monk begins in a humble village in Japan, where he was born into a family that had a long history of serving the Buddhist community. From an early age, he was immersed in the teachings of Buddhism, surrounded by the rich cultural and spiritual traditions of his ancestors. However, despite this deep-rooted connection to Buddhism, the young monk-to-be initially struggled with the concept of spiritual dedication. Like many young individuals, he found himself torn between the material world and the profound teachings of his faith. It was during his teenage years, after a personal crisis that shook his beliefs to their core, that he felt an overwhelming sense of calling to the monastery. This pivotal moment marked the beginning of his transformative journey. It was not just a shift in his external circumstances, but a deep internal awakening. He realized that true peace could only be found by turning inward, by letting go of attachment, and by embracing the teachings of the Buddha with complete devotion. This realization led him to seek out the guidance of his mentors at the Buddhist temple. The monk, still a teenager at the time, committed himself fully to the monastic lifestyle. He engaged in years of rigorous study, meditation, and self-discipline. These early years were marked by trials of physical and emotional endurance, as he worked to reconcile his past struggles with the wisdom he was gaining through his spiritual practices. Yet, despite the hardship, he never wavered from his goal, to deepen his understanding of the Dharma and to eventually serve as a guiding light for others who were suffering. Leadership through compassion. The journey from a young novice to the esteemed position of the abbot of the temple was not an easy one. As the abbot, the monk assumed a leadership role that demanded not only spiritual knowledge, but also the ability to manage the temple, guide his fellow monks, and offer counsel to those outside the temple seeking solace and answers to life's most profound questions. Leadership in the Buddhist community, as this monk came to understand, was not about power or control, but about service, humility, and compassion. The monk's leadership style was deeply rooted in the principles of mindfulness and compassion. He viewed his position not as one of authority, but as one of responsibility to nurture the growth of others and to create an environment where they could find peace and clarity. His leadership was defined by the quiet strength of his presence, his unwavering commitment to the teachings of the Buddha, and his ability to inspire those around him through his actions rather than his words. At the temple, he practiced the values of equanimity, humility, and non-attachment, which not only shaped his leadership style but also became the core values of the community he led. The temple was not just a place of worship. It was a sanctuary for people of all backgrounds who sought refuge from the noise and chaos of the outside world. Under his leadership, the temple became a hub for teachings, meditation retreats, and community outreach programs, where people could come to learn about Buddhist practices and philosophy, seek guidance, and find peace. Despite the challenges of leading a busy temple in the heart of a rapidly changing world, the monk remained grounded in his spiritual practice. His days were spent in meditation, chanting, and teaching, while his evenings were often dedicated to one-on-one sessions with his disciples or community members. His teachings, though rooted in ancient Buddhist wisdom, were always relevant to the concerns of the modern world. Whether discussing mindfulness in the workplace, the importance of compassion in personal relationships, or how to deal with the challenges of modern life, the monk's approach was always practical, yet deeply spiritual. The challenge of staying true to Buddhist values, one of the greatest challenges the monk faced in his leadership role, was balancing the traditional teachings of Buddhism with the demands and complexities of the modern world. As the world became increasingly globalized, the temple faced pressure to modernize its practices to appeal to younger generations. The monk found himself in a difficult position, trying to preserve the integrity of the ancient teachings while making them accessible and relevant to a diverse, fast-paced society. This balancing act required not only wisdom, but also adaptability. The monk understood that while the core principles of Buddhism, such as compassion, mindfulness, and non-attachment, remained timeless, the way they were communicated and practiced needed to evolve to meet the needs of today's world. For example, the monk embraced new technologies like social media and online teachings, which allowed him to reach a global audience. Through podcasts, online meditation sessions, and video teachings, he was able to share the profound wisdom of Buddhism with people around the world, from young adults seeking purpose to older individuals seeking solace and comfort in a time of crisis. Yet, despite the advancements in technology, the monk never lost sight of the importance of personal interaction and the power of face-to-face teachings. He believed that true transformation occurred not only through reading scriptures or listening to lectures, but also through the communal practice of meditation and mindful living. At the temple, the monk encouraged his followers to take time for silent reflection, to connect with the present moment, and to cultivate a deep sense of gratitude and appreciation for the beauty and impermanence of life. The monk's teachings were also centered around the notion of interconnectedness, how all beings are connected to one another and to the world around them. This interconnectedness, he explained, is what makes compassion and mindfulness so crucial in our daily lives. When we understand that our actions affect not only ourselves but others as well, we begin to see the importance of living ethically, with intention, and with respect for all beings. A journey of personal growth and wisdom through years of practice and experience, the monk not only grew as a leader, but also as an individual. His personal growth was not just a product of his education and his role as an abbot, but also of his deepening understanding of the self. The teachings of Buddhism emphasize the importance of self-awareness and self-realization, and the monk applied these principles to his own life. He began to understand that leadership was not just about guiding others, it was also about looking within and understanding one's own weaknesses, fears, and attachments. As a leader, the monk knew that his ability to help others depended on his ability to be fully present with himself, to cultivate his own mindfulness and compassion, and to model the values of Buddhism through his actions. This personal journey was not always easy. Like many others, the monk faced moments of doubt, frustration, and confusion. He struggled with the expectations placed upon him and the emotional toll of leadership. But through meditation, reflection, and the support of his fellow monks and mentors, he learned to navigate these challenges with grace and patience. He also learned to accept the impermanence of life and to embrace change rather than resist it. The monk realized that the path to wisdom and leadership was not linear. It was a process of continual learning, unlearning, and growing. And as he grew, so too did the community around him. Leading with compassion and wisdom as the monk continued to lead, his impact extended beyond the walls of the temple. His teachings resonated with people of all ages, backgrounds, and walks of life. In particular, his messages of inner peace, compassion, and mindfulness became especially relevant in an era marked by social and political divisions, environmental crises, and widespread anxiety. The monk's leadership was grounded in the belief that true change begins within. By cultivating inner peace, one could bring about positive transformation in the world around them. This message resonated deeply with his followers, who were seeking not only personal healing, but also a way to contribute to the healing of society. Many of his disciples went on to spread his teachings, establishing Buddhist centers around the world and carrying forward the legacy of mindfulness, compassion, and ethical living. In the end, the monk's leadership was not measured by his material success or the number of people who followed him, but by the lives he touched and the transformation he inspired in others. He became a living embodiment of the Buddhist values he had spent his life studying and practicing. His leadership was one of service, humility, and compassion, a leadership that sought not to control, but to uplift, not to dominate, but to empower. The eternal path of a Buddhist leader, the journey of the 40-year-old Japanese Buddhist monk, is a story of deep transformation, both personal and spiritual. It is a journey marked by dedication, challenges, and a commitment to wisdom, compassion, and leadership. As the abbot of his temple, the monk has not only guided his followers on their own paths of awakening, but has also inspired countless others to live with mindfulness, to lead with integrity, and to cultivate compassion in their daily lives. This story reminds us that leadership is not about power or authority, it is about service, self-awareness, and the ability to help others find their own path to peace. In a world that often seems consumed by chaos, the teachings of the Buddhist monk offer a beacon of hope and a path to lasting inner peace. Through his journey, we learn that true leadership is rooted in humility, compassion, and wisdom, the qualities that allow us to navigate life's greatest challenges with grace and resilience. Life lessons and the power of resilience. A reflection on the journey of a Japanese Buddhist monk. As we journey through life, we often face obstacles that seem insurmountable, whether they come in the form of personal loss, societal pressures, or the inevitable challenges of aging. It is in these moments that we may find ourselves searching for meaning and direction, seeking something to anchor us in a world that often feels uncertain. The story of a 40-year-old Japanese Buddhist monk, his journey of self-discovery, and his leadership as an abbot offers profound insights into the power of resilience, the importance of mindfulness, and the enduring value of compassion, lessons that are deeply relevant to us, particularly as we grow older and reflect on our own paths in life. One of the most profound lessons that can be drawn from the monk's life is the importance of inner strength and resilience. The monk, from an early age, faced personal struggles and challenges that forced him to confront his own limitations. Yet, rather than succumbing to despair, he chose to engage with life's difficulties with determination and faith. In many ways, life itself can be seen as a test of resilience. Aging brings with it its own set of challenges: physical decline, the loss of loved ones, the questioning of purpose, and the feeling of being forgotten in a world that is always moving forward. But, much like the monk, we too can choose to meet these challenges with grace and strength. Resilience does not mean ignoring the difficulties we face, but rather embracing them as opportunities for growth. Through resilience, we learn that even in our most difficult moments, there's an opportunity for inner transformation. The monk's life also highlights the power of mindfulness, the practice of being fully present in the moment. Mindfulness teaches us to pay attention to our thoughts, emotions, and surroundings without judgment. For older adults, this practice can be particularly transformative. As we age, we often find ourselves reflecting on the past or worrying about the future. Our minds may be filled with regrets or anxieties about what's to come. Mindfulness, however, allows us to center ourselves in the present moment, to embrace each experience as it comes, and to find peace in the here and now. The monk's practice of mindfulness not only helped him navigate the challenges of his leadership role, but also allowed him to remain grounded in his spiritual practice. It was through mindfulness that he was able to connect with his deeper self and with the world around him. For those of us in later stages of life, this is a powerful reminder that peace is not something we need to search for. It exists within us, waiting to be uncovered by our attention and awareness. Another vital lesson from the monk's journey is the importance of compassion. not only toward others, but also toward ourselves. Compassion is often thought of as something we extend to others, but it is just as crucial that we offer it to ourselves, especially as we age. Many older adults struggle with feelings of guilt or regret, wishing they had done things differently in their lives. However, true compassion is about accepting ourselves, flaws and all, and recognizing that we have done the best we could with the circumstances we faced. The monk's role as a leader was not just to guide others, but to lead with compassion, understanding the pain and suffering of others and offering them support without judgment. This compassionate leadership is something that can be applied to our own lives as we grow older. It encourages us to let go of harsh self-criticism and to replace it with kindness and acceptance. The compassion that we extend to ourselves not only brings us peace, but also allows us to share that peace with those around us, whether they're family members, friends, or even strangers. The monk's ability to adapt to the changing world is another crucial lesson, especially for older adults. The world today is vastly different from the one many of us grew up in, with rapid technological advances, societal shifts, and global changes. It can be overwhelming to keep up with these changes, and it's easy to feel disconnected or left behind. However, like the monk who adapted his teachings to meet the needs of a modern audience, we too can embrace change. Adaptation does not mean abandoning our values or traditions, but finding new ways to engage with the world in a meaningful way. The monk's use of technology to reach people across the globe, for example, is an inspiring reminder that no matter our age, we can always learn new tools and find new methods to connect with others. For older adults, this lesson encourages us to be open to learning, to embrace new experiences, and to remain curious about the world, even as we grow older. Furthermore, the monk's journey emphasizes the importance of spiritual guidance and community. In a time when many people, particularly older adults, may feel isolated or disconnected, it is vital to remember the role of spiritual practices and community support in our lives. The monk was not only a leader of a temple, but also a member of a larger community, people who shared his values, his struggles, and his aspirations. Spiritual guidance and community offer a sense of belonging and connection that is deeply fulfilling, especially in later years. As we age, it can be easy to retreat into isolation, but the monk's story shows us the power of connection not only with others, but with something greater than ourselves. Whether through religious practices, volunteer work, or simply maintaining relationships with family and friends, we are reminded that the support of others can provide us with the strength and motivation we need to navigate the challenges of aging. In conclusion, the life of the 40-year-old Japanese Buddhist monk offers valuable lessons for all of us, especially as we reflect on our own journeys through life. The lessons of resilience, mindfulness, compassion, adaptability, and the importance of spiritual guidance and community are as relevant today as they were centuries ago. As we grow older, we may find ourselves facing new challenges, but by embracing these teachings, we can approach these challenges with a sense of peace, purpose, and strength. Just as the monk found his path to wisdom through self-discipline and devotion, we too can continue to learn, grow, and lead lives filled with meaning and fulfillment. By staying present, being compassionate with ourselves and others, and remaining open to change, we can navigate the complexities of aging with grace and wisdom. The journey may not always be easy, but with resilience and mindfulness, we can walk it with confidence, knowing that each step brings us closer to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. Thank you so much for watching. We hope you found inspiration in today's video about empowerment and protection. Don't forget to like and subscribe to Stories TH for more amazing content that will help you live your best life. Stay empowered, stay protected, and we'll see you in the next video.